My name is Zhu Yan. I must have slept for too long because my head was spinning and a dull ache throbbed behind my eyes. I forced myself to blink, waiting for the world to stop blurring. I wasn't sure if I had just woken up from a nightmare. There were no images in the dream, only a persistent, mechanical voice shouting in my mind. Ability loading complete, it had said. Congratulations on becoming part of the first batch of closed beta players. Then, it barked out another command that didn't make any sense. Players, please check your identity badges and ability cards. Repeat, please check your identity badges and ability cards. The voice didn't stop until those words were burned into my brain. I sat up and wiped the cold sweat from my forehead. This felt different from a normal dream. The memory was too sharp, too vivid. It felt like those announcements had actually happened in the real world. I got out of bed and headed toward the living room. My aunt was there, scrolling through short videos on her phone. The volume was loud enough for me to hear every word. Reliable sources confirm that 200 people in our city have died suddenly in their homes, the news anchor said. All deaths were caused by sudden cardiac arrest. Police have ruled out foul play. It was true. In Bailu City, the number of sudden deaths had spiked over the past week. The victims' conditions were bizarre. News outlets and social media were obsessed with it. Even someone like me, who rarely watched videos, couldn't ignore it. A wild thought hit me. Players? Closed beta? Ability cards? Could these things be connected to the massive wave of deaths? I pushed the thought aside and opened my bedroom door. Aunt, I called out. My parents died when I was young, so my aunt and uncle became my guardians. Their apartment was tiny, 2 small bedrooms, a kitchen, and a bathroom all squeezed around a cramped living room. A woman with heavy makeup turned toward me. Her lifeless eyes stared through thick, fake lashes. She pointed at a broom near the door. Since you're awake, do some work. Sweep the floor and take out the trash. Don't be ungrateful. Your parents left us such a mess to clean up. I looked at her and stayed quiet. I knew the fastest way to shut her up was to obey. I grabbed the overflowing trash bag and tied it shut. Predictably, her complaining shifted gears. Your cousin is finished with his tutoring starting tomorrow. You're moving out of your room to sleep on the sofa. I found you a job. Once things settle down outside next month, you're going to work. I mumbled a quick agreement and headed downstairs with the trash. My aunt treated me like garbage, but she kept me fed and let me go to school. Since she didn't care enough to watch me closely, I actually had more freedom than her own son. I didn't mind the small insults. As long as they didn't interfere with my plans, I was fine. I tossed the trash into the bin and headed straight for the courier station. I needed to pick up my university admission letter. My aunt's plan for me was simple. I was supposed to be a human ATM for my cousin. I was supposed to work at some factory her friend managed and have my salary sent directly to her card. Like hell I was doing that. I had done well on my exams and applied to a university 1,000 miles away behind her back. I'd saved up some money from part-time jobs. My plan was to vanish while my aunt and uncle were too scared of the sudden death news to leave the house. The warm sun hit my face, chasing away the chill in my heart. I tore open the courier package and tucked the official envelope into my jacket. Habitually, I checked the empty bag one last time. My fingers brushed against something. There was a small black envelope tucked in the corner. It was about the size of my palm, just large enough to hold a credit card. On the front, there was a gold-stamped pattern. It looked like a tangled mess of yarn, but it had a strange, rhythmic beauty to it. I squeezed it. There was something hard inside, a card and a coin. Is this a meal card? I muttered to myself. I checked the bag again to make sure I hadn't missed anything, then shoved the black envelope into my pocket. I decided to head home and check it in the privacy of the bathroom. As for my admission letter, I couldn't take it back inside. If my aunt found it, she'd burn it. I reached the landing between the 5th and 6th floors of our old apartment building. A dusty mirror leaned against an old plastic bucket in the corner. I checked this spot before. It was just full of junk and dust. Nobody ever touched it. I knelt down and hid my admission letter deep inside the bucket. The mirror caught my reflection. My black hair was long enough to tie back in a messy ponytail. My eyes were sharp, slanting upward slightly at the corners. With my high nose and thin lips, I looked a bit cunning. The only problem was my expression. I looked dead inside, like someone who was perfectly calm but ready to snap at any second. I didn't linger. I hurried back up to the apartment. What took you so long? My aunt snapped. Her sharp eyes scanned me, looking for anything suspicious. When she saw I was empty-handed, she relaxed and went back to her phone. I ducked into the bathroom and locked the door. Carefully, I tore open the black envelope and pulled out a hard, black card. Bright crimson text was printed on one side. Player ability card. Your ability, acting talent. You often create alternate accounts online, playing different genders and personalities to test reactions. This is your instinctual protection. It is also your foundation for walking through the carnival paradise. Current ability level, rank 3. Please confirm whether to accept this ability. Once accepted, the card will merge with you. If not accepted, the ability will be automatically activated when the dungeon begins. Note: the dungeon will begin in 3 hours. My mind went blank. The hair on my arms stood up. My scalp felt like it was exploding. Carnival paradise. Dungeons. It matched the dream perfectly. I had dreamed about an ability card, and now I was holding one that shouldn't exist. Was this from the school? Did they send this weird card to every student? I didn't believe it for a second. If this was real, the implications were terrifying. If it wasn't the school, then who put this in my package? I pulled out the coin-like object from the envelope. In the dim light of the bathroom, I realized it was a metal badge. There was no pin to attach it to clothes. On the front, there was an engraving of a bird trapped inside a dragon's eye, carved with a black key. The bird looked like it was struggling to escape. It looked hauntingly alive. The feathers on the bird's wings were carved with terrifying detail. My heart skipped a beat. A heavy, ominous feeling settled in my gut. The badge was beautifully crafted, heavy enough to be solid gold. If this was a prank, it was an incredibly expensive one. I flipped the badge over. The back was covered in tiny, dense rows of text. The bathroom light was too dim to read them, so I clicked on my phone's flashlight and leaned in close. I read it line by line. Please note, once the package is signed for, you have 2 hours to decide whether to become a player. My blood ran cold. It was a trap. The rules stated that as soon as I picked up that package, the timer started. It didn't matter if I opened the envelope or not. Asterisk: if you do not make a decision in time, I will assume you agree to become a player. The novice dungeon will begin at your current location within 3 hours of confirmation. Asterisk. The text repeated that last sentence 5 times. It felt like a threat. Asterisk: if you agree to become a player, press your left index finger onto the badge pattern for 3 seconds. The badge will merge with your body and become a brand. Asterisk. I kept reading, my breath hitching. Asterisk: if you refuse to become a player, press your left pinky finger onto the text side of the badge for 3 seconds. The badge will merge with your body, and you will die in a completely natural way. Asterisk. A sense of pure absurdity washed over me. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard it hurt. At first, when I read words like player and dungeon, I thought this might be some high-tech criminal organization. But the part about merging with the body and dying naturally made me think of the news. All those people lately who had dropped dead from sudden cardiac arrest. Maybe I wasn't the only one who got a badge. I checked my phone. The internet was exploding with theories, but the police still hadn't released any results. I pressed a hand against my chest to calm my racing heart. If the authorities knew anything, they would have said it by now. The fact that they were silent after days of investigation meant they either couldn't find a cause, or the cause was impossible to explain. If those people really died because of these badges, then this was real. The bird struggling in the dragons' eye wasn't just art. There was something supernatural behind it. The bathroom was hot, damp, and dark. I used my flashlight to scan the very bottom of the badge, looking for any other clue. You may also use your left middle finger to press the front of the badge for 3 seconds to access the player forum as a guest. Guests can only browse and cannot post or comment. Please pay attention to forum tips. This is for your own protection. A forum. That was exactly what I needed. There would be other players there, people who actually knew what was going on. At the very bottom, I saw one final line. This badge was manufactured by the Lazy Man's Craft Shop. Another lead. If I could find that shop, I might find answers. I tucked the ability card away and pressed my left middle finger to the front of the badge. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. A sharp, Loud beep echoed through the small room. I jumped, nearly dropping the badge. Holy crap, I hissed. My voice cut right through the thin wooden door. What are you screaming about? My aunt yelled from the hallway. If you break anything in my house, you're staying on your knees until morning. I didn't answer her. A clear, pleasant electronic female voice was speaking directly into my ears, overlapping with my aunt's nagging. Hello, guest. Welcome to the player forum. Your guest account will be active for 1 hour and 30 minutes. Suddenly, my vision shifted. Bright red text flickered into existence right in the center of my field of view. It looked like it was floating on the grime-stained glass of the shower door. Forum tip: protect your privacy. Do not let others know about Carnival Paradise or your identity. I stared, stunned. I reached out to touch the words, but my hand passed right through them. They weren't a projection. They were burned directly onto my retinas. Zhuyan, did you hear me? My aunt's voice got shriller. I shoved the badge into my pocket and cracked the door open. Auntie, did you hear a weird sound just now? She knit her brows, looking at me like I was crazy. Are you mocking me? You're the one in there cursing and making noise. She hadn't heard a thing. I mumbled a quick apology, making up an excuse about moving my stuff to make room for my cousin. I hurried back to my room and locked the door, sliding down against it until I was sitting on the floor, gasping for air. This was too much. The forum tip faded, replaced by a full interface of posts and images. It looked a lot like a social media feed. The very first post at the top had a white background with bold black text. Newbies, listen up. This is not a hallucination. You haven't been poisoned by wild mushrooms. The words were thick and heavy. I didn't click it yet. I scrolled down with my eyes, the page moving fluidly as if it knew exactly where I was looking. Are there any veteran players here? What is Carnival Paradise? My sister just died in the novice dungeon. I thought it was just a heart attack. I scrolled through 2 pages. 8 out of 10 posts were people panicking and asking questions. I finally scrolled back up to that first post. I stared at it for 3 seconds, and the thread opened. I am a player who has survived 2 rounds of dungeons, the post began. I want to tell you all, this is real. Do not doubt what you see. There are no hallucinogens on the badges or cards. You aren't dreaming. I studied the post with intense focus. The author wasn't joking. They warned us not to get brainwashed or succumb to the dizziness. Once the game started, I had to stay calm and use my abilities wisely. Most importantly, I couldn't call the police. I couldn't go to a mental hospital. I couldn't tell anyone what I was experiencing. I had to hide my identity and my powers at all costs. That was the extent of the veteran's advice. The post was 5 days old. A wave of absurdity washed over me, so strong I almost wanted to laugh. The veteran was right. Most people would assume they were hallucinating when they heard these voices or saw these screens. I scrolled down to the comments and noticed something chilling. Many of the profile pictures were now grayed out, deactivated. One comment from 2 days ago caught my eye. I found my envelope at an internet cafe. I'm an addict with a trash life anyway, so I chose to be a player. Here's my name and address. I'm alone. If I don't make it, someone call the police to collect my body. His profile was black. I looked up the address on my phone. The place actually existed, a rundown apartment complex with a grimy internet cafe right outside. My heart sank. If it could be verified in the real world, it wasn't a hallucination. Another comment read, I found the card on my sister's desk after she died suddenly. I didn't pass the novice dungeon. This is my last 10 minutes. Good luck, strangers. The stories were everywhere. People found envelopes in new clothes, in gifts, or tucked between banknotes from the ATM. The methods were as ridiculous as they were varied. One person warned again, don't call the police. My neighbor did, and the officers took his card and badge. It won't stop the mission, it just leaks your privacy. I checked. The police found no record of the slacker's craft shop. It doesn't exist in reality. That user's account was also gone. I searched for more advice on the novice dungeon, but found nothing. It didn't matter. I realized that believing or disbelieving wouldn't change my reality. If this was a delusion, then becoming a player didn't hurt. I'd end up in a psych ward either way. But if it was real, joining early meant I could master my abilities before the dungeon started. Looking at those black profile pictures, the survival rate for the novice dungeon looked to be around 40%. That was lower than the high school entrance exam pass rate back home. I kept digging until I found a tip that confirmed my theory. Become a player early to merge with your ability. Your everyday talent is not the same as your game ability. They feel completely different. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I pulled the badge from my pocket and pressed my left index finger against it, just like the instructions said. 1, 2, 3. A loud banging erupted at my door. "Lin Yuan," my aunt shouted from the hallway. "The meat and vegetables I ordered are here. Get downstairs and pick them up now." "Coming," I yelled back. I looked down and saw the badge melting in my palm like warm chocolate. The golden liquid seeped into my skin, sending a wave of heat racing through my veins, from my feet to my forehead. "You have chosen to become a player," the elegant female voice announced. "Once the merger is complete, place the ability card in your palm." I stood up carefully. The golden liquid was gone, replaced by a small black bird tattoo etched into the center of my palm. I rubbed at it, but it wouldn't budge. It was part of me now. The doorknob rattled violently. My aunt was losing her patience. "Are you deaf?" she screamed. I shoved my left hand into my pocket, gripping the ability card tight against my skin. I opened the door, offered a quick, fake apology, and rushed past her. As I headed down the stairs, I felt the hard card soften against my palm like a piece of melting rice paper. "Why haven't you packed your things yet?" she barked after me. "When you get back, you're kneeling on the floor. No dinner for you." I ignored her. Halfway down the stairs, floating text appeared before my eyes. Ability merger complete. Roleplay, level 3. Effect 1. You can mimic the behavior of level 3 or lower horror creatures. They will perceive you as one of their own. No time limit. Effect 2. You can slightly alter your aura to deceive level 3 or lower players. They will think you are someone else or a creature. No time limit. Effect 3. You can hide your player tattoo for 1 hour per dungeon. I felt a surge of excitement. This was a survivalist's dream. Being able to blend in with the monsters could save my life. But I forced myself to stay grounded. The survival rate was still terrifyingly low. Player, Lin Yuan. Level, 0. Ability, level 3. The fact that I had a level 3 ability as a level 0 player meant I had a massive head start. I reached the delivery station and grabbed the bag of groceries. The bag wasn't tied shut, and as I looked inside, my heart stopped. Tucked between the vegetables was a small black envelope. The golden pattern on it was identical to mine. It was for my aunt. Had she had the dream too? I checked to make sure no one was watching, then quickly pulled the card out of her envelope to read it. Your ability, grievance. Description: you are a bitter, middle-aged woman. You constantly insult and complain about others. This is proof of your own unhappiness, and your primary tool for making everyone else just as miserable. Asterisk. I knew I was in a life-or-death situation, and I shouldn't have been laughing, but the system's description was perfect. Current ability level, 2. Reason: your talent for nagging is truly world-class. I was grinning like a madman when the female voice spoke in my head again. The smile was still lingering on my face when the notification flashed in my mind. Attention, player. Your beginner dungeon, Who is the Crown Prince, will begin in 2 hours. Horror creature level, level 2, common weirdo. Mission: survive for 2 hours. Location: room 601, building 3, on Yuan Village, Bailu City. My thoughts raced. The location was my aunt's house. Since she had received a badge and an ability card too, it was clear we were being thrown into the same dungeon. The name of the mission, Who is the Crown Prince, felt like a cruel joke aimed at my aunt's obsession with her son. A common weirdo. My heart sank slightly, but strangely, I felt a rush of adrenaline. If the dungeon started in 2 hours, that would be around 6 o'clock, exactly when my uncle and cousin were supposed to be home. If this game was real, then who or what was going to replace them? I tucked the black card into my pocket and stood by the delivery lockers, thinking hard. My aunt and I were in the same dungeon, but given the mocking name of the mission, we weren't necessarily on the same side. We might be rivals. I needed to understand her ability. If my card described my hidden traits, hers did the same. Grievance was a tool to make others as miserable as she was. This likely meant her constant nagging and complaining would physically or mentally debuff players or even the horror creatures. If she complained about you, you'd probably run into bad luck. I was a level 3 ability holder, meaning I could influence creatures up to level 3. My aunt was level 2, so her power would only work on lower-level threats. I glanced at the time on the locker screen. I had stayed out here as long as I dared. If I lingered any longer, her grievance would start before the dungeon even began. I stuffed her black envelope into my pocket and headed upstairs. I couldn't let her see it. A woman like her would only fly into a rage, blame me for everything, and probably make me kneel on a washboard for hours. If my mental state was shaken now, I wouldn't survive. I owed her for raising me, sure, but I wasn't going to be a martyr. I had to look out for myself first. I stopped in front of a mirror in the hallway and focused. I imagined my cousin's face, his flat features, his taller frame. It felt as natural as breathing. Right before my eyes, the person in the mirror shifted. My height shot up, my face changed, and even my aura matched his perfectly. Holy crap, I whispered. My own reflection felt like an attack on my senses, but I loved it. This was an incredible power. With a thought, I shifted back to my normal self. I checked my hidden college acceptance letter one last time, then walked into the apartment as if nothing was wrong. I ignored my aunt's irritated glare and went straight to my room to pack. I didn't have much, just a few changes of clothes. I made sure to grab my power bank and charger. If things went south tonight, I wasn't staying. If I survived the next 2 hours, I was leaving this house for good. The sun began to set, and the smell of dinner filled the cramped apartment. Sweet and sour ribs, stir-fried peas, spicy chicken wings. It was a feast. I stayed quiet, sweeping the floor to give my aunt no reason to scream at me. 5:49 p.m. The clock ticked slowly. Then, I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. As my aunt set the last dish of greens on the table, a rhythmic knock echoed against the security door. I put the broom away, my muscles tensing. They were here. My aunt wiped her hands on her apron, her face lighting up. Oh, is our little prince home? I looked at the peeling wallpaper and the cramped living room. Some palace. Mom. A coarse, trembling voice reached my ears. My cousin squeezed through the door. He was tall and thin, but his face wasn't arrogant like usual. He looked terrified. He didn't even stop to take off his shoes. He just tried to slam the door shut behind him. Wait, honey. My aunt grabbed the door. Your father is still outside. She pulled him in, trying to lead him to the sofa. What's wrong? Did something happen at school? Tell Mama. I watched him closely. He must have received a black envelope too. My cousin violently shoved her away. He lunged for the door again, but he was too late. A middle-aged man with a beer belly walked in. He closed the door and turned the deadbolt. I focused my mind. I am a weirdo, I told myself, activating my aura. My presence shifted, blending into the shadows of the room. I looked at the man. He looked exactly like my uncle, the same oily skin, the same clothes. But his eyes were dead. They were cold, glassy, and fixed on us with a hunger that made my skin crawl. He looked like a killing machine forced to mimic a human. You don't understand, my cousin screamed, sprinting toward the kitchen for a meat cleaver. That's not my dad. I'm going to die. Mom, I'm going to die. My aunt panicked, rushing to stop him, while the man, the thing that looked like my uncle, stepped forward with a stiff, jerky motion to help her. I took 2 steps forward, pretending to be part of the family so I wouldn't stand out. It was all real. 5 minutes left. My cousin's screams turned into a shrill wail as the common weirdo easily wrenched the cleaver from his hand. Mom, I got a game card, he shrieked, backed into a corner. It says I'm the prince, and the king has to die. Snot and tears streamed down my cousin's face. I finally understood the pattern. Everyone who hadn't died yet had received a game card. We were trapped in a horror instance, and the thing that followed him home wasn't my uncle at all. That's not my dad, my cousin roared, his hands tightening like a vice around my aunt's shoulders. I noticed my aunt's face shift from a sickly yellow to a deathly pale. My heart hammered against my ribs. In the middle of this suffocating terror, I felt something strange. It was a faint, hidden spark of pleasure. I bit my tongue hard, the sharp pain forcing me to focus. Son, have you lost your mind? My aunt stammered, her voice trembling. Come on, let's sit down and talk. What game card? Is someone bullying you at school? Are they threatening you? I glanced at the time. Only 3 minutes until the instance officially started. Judging by my aunt's reaction, she hadn't heard the system announcement yet. No way, my cousin screamed in agony. I checked the forums. People said the newbie instances are usually group events. Everyone involved gets a card. I hadn't seen that post, but I didn't care. I was ready to use my ability at any second. 2.5 minutes left. Mom, you got one too, right? He pleaded, his voice cracking. A big black envelope with your ability written on it. It had a gold seal. My card says bully. If you open it, an electronic voice makes an announcement. He gestured wildly, but my aunt's expression was devastating. What envelope? She asked cautiously, her face full of motherly concern. Have you been brainwashed by the internet? Someone is hurting you, aren't they? Forcing you to watch weird things. Bully. Given my cousin's usual behavior, I could guess what that meant. It was an ability to oppress others for his own gain. My aunt's worry turned into a flash of anger as she started cursing. What kind of school is this? What are the teachers doing? My son gets bullied and they just look the other way? I'm calling the Education Bureau right now. Mom, that's enough. My cousin slammed his hand onto the dining table, sending soup splashing everywhere. Can't you understand plain English? Cold sweat soaked my palms. I watched the clock, counting down the seconds. 10, 9, 8. My cousin spun around, his eyes locking onto me with pure hatred. Lin Yuan, is this your fault? You received something, didn't you? Why doesn't my mom know anything? Why didn't she get a notification? 1 second left. Suddenly, my aunt shrieked in the middle of the room, looking like she'd been struck by lightning. I heard it too. That cold, female voice echoed again. Newbie instance. Who is the crown prince? Officially beginning now. Duration, 2 hours. I didn't hesitate. I activated my power. This time, I wouldn't just be a shadow. I needed to become my cousin. In this house, I knew my aunt better than anyone. My cousin only saw her doting love and her pushy ambition for his success. I was the one who had to live with her paranoia, her anxiety, and her desperate need for stability. Now, her world was being ripped apart. The forum post I read mentioned that some players would feel brainwashed or dizzy. Someone like my aunt would desperately try to force life back onto its normal track rather than face a cruel reality. If I played the role she craved, I could control everything. So I shifted. I became her precious son. My aunt looked terrified, her head spinning. Who is that? Why is the room moving? She gasped, looking for the source of the voice. I lunged forward, shoving the real cousin aside and grabbing her arm. Mom, what's wrong? The real cousin was caught off guard and stumbled back. You motherf, he started to curse, but the words died in his throat when he looked at me. In front of him stood another version of himself. The face, the hair, the height, the clothes, everything was identical. The only difference was the look in my eyes. He stared at me, then whipped his head around to look at the uncle by the door. They were the same. Both had that indescribable, mechanical cruelty. His face twisted from shock to pure horror. When he had walked in, I was still Lin Yuan. How was this possible? Who the hell are you cussing at? I snapped, using his own arrogant tone. I pulled my aunt toward a chair, ignoring his stunned silence. Can't you see Mom is hurting? You start acting crazy the second I get home. What is wrong with you? I sat her down and turned to the creature that looked like my uncle. Dad, hurry up and serve the food. Stop standing there with that cleaver. I'm starving. My aunt was hyperventilating beside me. The sudden changes and the ghostly voice had broken her. She was probably thinking about the nightmare she had last night. She looked at me, then at my cousin, unable to comprehend why there were two of her sons. I glared at the uncle. I wasn't sure how smart these weirdos were, but this one had managed to pick up my cousin and lock the door. He had to understand speech. He might even have my uncle's memories. I decided to give him a clear hint. What are you standing there for? Can't you see this guy has gone insane? I jerked my chin toward my cousin, my voice dripping with sarcasm. He thinks he's me. He blocked my way when I came in and started bullying Mom. What are you talking about? My cousin screamed. Mom, don't believe him. He pointed at me, his eyes wide. We have to kill him to survive. My heart skipped a beat. Was his mission to kill the fake prince? I went on high alert, maintaining my disguise. I looked at the uncle. The creature seemed to understand. Its cold, glassy eyes fixed on my cousin. Seeing the shift in its expression, I doubled down on the bratty attitude. Dad, your nephew is losing it. Why haven't you hit him yet? My cousin finally snapped out of his shock. The instance was called True and False Prince. Looking at me, he thought he knew what was happening. He thought his task was to kill the fake prince, me, to survive. He probably thought the real Lin Yuan was already dead or replaced, just like his father. To him, I was just another monster. He looked at me with a murderous glint. Killing a human was easy. Dealing with a weirdo was harder. But he was desperate. He grabbed a heavy wooden stool and swung it over his head, charging at me. "I'll kill you." I leaped backward. "Dad," the stool missed me. Before my cousin could swing again, the uncle moved. He grabbed my cousin around the waist from behind and slammed him into the floor. The stool fell, crushing my cousin's own foot. "Ack, my foot." The creature's face twitched, its expression briefly mimicking my uncle's scowl. It was a low-level weirdo. It didn't know the player count or our secret goals, but it knew how to follow an order. The creature wasn't just a mindless beast. It had my uncle's memories and could mimic him perfectly, but more importantly, it could sense its own kind. From the moment I stepped through the door and activated my acting talent, it saw me as a fellow monster. To him, I was a high-level entity, someone who could swap skins at will. I was a predator, just like him, but clearly more skilled. When I told him to handle the nephew, he didn't see a family dispute. He saw an invitation to claim his meal. "Enough," the creature said. Its voice was cold, but I caught a flicker of excitement in its eyes. "Sit down. Let's eat." I breathed a silent sigh of relief. I really should have found a weapon before this started. My aunt was a total mess. She looked at me, then at her actual son crawling off the floor, and her brain just stalled. She couldn't process the sight of two identical sons. Her mind was a fog of confusion and terror. In her desperation, she turned to the only thing that looked normal, the monster pretending to be her husband. "Loudly," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "What's happening to me? Am I going crazy?" "You're being tricked," my cousin roared. He was reaching his breaking point. He lunged forward and grabbed her arm, shaking her violently. "Mom, you heard the broadcast. What's your mission? They aren't human. We have to finish the game to survive." I was curious about her mission too, but this wasn't the time to ask. She was on the edge of a total collapse. Her lips were trembling and her eyes were bloodshot from crying. I had to act fast. "If you're not sick, then shut up." I yelled at him. I channeled my cousin's usual arrogance perfectly. "Who are you calling Mom? You're not even worthy of having a mother. Call her auntie, you freak. Get out of here." It was a classic line my cousin used to use on me. I delivered it with just the right amount of venom. My aunt flinched, the familiarity of the insult grounding her in a twisted way. My uncle let out a cold laugh. "I think you've lost your mind." "What broadcast? We didn't hear anything." Even though I knew he was a monster, the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. He sounded exactly like my real uncle complaining about a noisy neighbor. He grabbed my cousin with a stiff, powerful arm and forced him back into his chair. He was eyeing his food with a terrifying hunger now. My aunt looked at the monster, pleading for an answer. "But why do they look the same?" The creature sneered. "They don't look the same at all. Look closer. Our son is sitting right next to you." He was just making things up based on my uncle's memories, but it was exactly what she wanted to hear. Her face relaxed slightly. She looked at me, then at her real son, and then back to the monster for protection. My cousin was terrified. He was a level 0 player facing a level 2 monster. He couldn't escape without using his ability, but he had to attack to trigger it. Desperation took over. Under the table, he stomped hard on the monster's foot. The creature hissed and let go. My cousin lunged at me across the table. "I'll kill you." The table shook. Plates of food crashed to the floor, shattering into a mess of porcelain and sauce. I knew I couldn't win a physical fight, so I grabbed a chopstick and backed away. I noticed my aunt had pushed him away earlier. Her mental defenses were crumbling. I decided to gamble on her special ability, the one she didn't even know she had. "Mom, he's trying to kill me. Help!" I screamed. If that didn't work, the chopstick was going into his eye. "Enough!" my aunt shrieked. A sudden, violent strength erupted from her. She stood up and shoved my cousin back, so hard his chair flipped over. She was hysterical now. "What are you doing?" my cousin screamed. "You're—" "Shut up," my aunt barked. "You're a lunatic. Get away from us." I stayed hidden behind her, watching closely. To her, my cousin was now the one ruining her life. She started her usual routine, the endless, soul-crushing complaining. You're sick. I don't care who you are. You're sick and you're making me sick too. You're not my son. I felt a heavy, suffocating pressure in my chest. That was her power. Since her rant wasn't aimed at me, I was okay, but my cousin was taking the full hit. His face turned paper white. His lips lost all color. He tried to speak, but she just kept going, burying him under a mountain of resentment. Do you know how hard I worked on this meal? You're so ungrateful. I don't care about some stupid game. My nerves are already shot, and you're making me see things. I realized then that her newbie buff was basically a mental breakdown that projected her anxiety onto others. She thought she was just having a panic attack or a bad dream. I moved in to help her sit down, playing the part of the doting son. Mom, just relax, I said, mimicking my cousin's voice to a T. I'm really hungry. Let's just eat. The power of her complaining had drained the life out of my cousin. He glared at me, his body shaking with pure hatred, but he couldn't move. I didn't feel sorry for him. This spoiled brat had tried to kill me the second he felt threatened. I'm not blind, my aunt muttered, clutching her chest. I see how you're looking at us. Close your mouth, my uncle said sternly. The monster dragged my cousin back to his seat once more. This time, my cousin was too weak to fight back. Quiet down, the creature said. It was a perfect imitation of my uncle, but I noticed its eyes were locked onto my cousin's neck. It swallowed hard, starving. We're family. Why all the fighting? Our son only comes home once a week. Let's get back to business. It turned to me with a strange, robotic respect. Can we eat now? When it looked at me, the hunger in its eyes vanished. It still thought I was the one in charge. The monster looked at me with a stiff, almost fawning expression. I could see the hunger in its eyes, but there was something else there too, a weird kind of respect. It was like a student looking at a teacher or a subordinate waiting for orders from a boss. I didn't know why it was treating me like a superior, and I didn't have time to figure it out. My stomach twisted with nerves. I knew that in this world, eating was everything. I took a breath, forcing my racing heart to slow down, and nodded. I tried to look as relaxed as possible, mimicking my cousin's arrogant posture. Of course we can eat, I said. The monster's lips pulled back into a wide, eager grin. It couldn't wait. My cousin realized what was happening. The color drained from his face. Mom, he screamed, his voice cracking with pure terror. He found a sudden burst of strength and tried to lung forward. Save me. You were just yelling at him. Save me. It was too late. When the monster had first entered the house, it had snatched a meat cleaver from the kitchen. Now, with a sickening thud, that blade slammed into my cousin's spine. I turned pale, my stomach churning, but I forced myself not to blink. I couldn't look away. Not now. My aunt froze. Specks of crimson splashed across her face. My cousin collapsed onto the table, his upper body covered in spilled food and blood. He let out a low, agonizing wail. The hatred in his eyes was so thick you could almost touch it, but he wasn't looking at me. He was staring at his mother. He couldn't understand. He didn't understand why she was so stupid. He had a level 2 ability. He was stronger than most of his classmates. He should have been able to pass this trial. He had even managed to break free from the monster's grip once. But his own mother's mental breakdown had crippled him. She had killed him. My aunt stood there in a daze for a few seconds before letting out a sharp, jagged scream. Then, her eyes rolled back, and she slumped to the floor, unconscious. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I dug my fingernails into my palms, fighting the urge to scream, to vomit, or to pass out. I couldn't. Those weren't the reactions of a monster. I had to stay in character. I had to be the person in charge. The creature looked up from the table, its mouth stained red. Aren't you eating? It asked. Its voice had lost every trace of humanity. It sounded cold and hollow. My cousin's hand was draped over a plate of spicy chicken wings. The heavy smell of iron mixed with the scent of the food, making my head spin. I bit my tongue hard. I couldn't throw up. It wasn't over yet. I wanted to live. I checked the time. Only 40 minutes had passed since the game started. I still had an hour and 15 minutes to go. I forced myself to look the monster in the eye, using my cousin's tone. I have a bit of a stomach ache, I said coldly. I prefer to eat in a quiet environment. I'll take my food to my room. Do not disturb me. The monster had addressed me with a formal sir. I wasn't sure if that was normal or if it was sucking up to me, so I played it safe and didn't use any titles back. It didn't seem to mind. In fact, it seemed honored. Of course, it said, bowing its head. I wouldn't dream of it. The creature went back to its meal, making horrific crunching noises. I moved quickly, dragging my unconscious aunt into the bedroom. I locked the door and hauled her onto the bed. Even behind closed doors, I didn't dare cry. I didn't dare let my guard down. I sat there, counting every second. That hour and 15 minutes felt like an entire lifetime. When there were only 2 minutes left, the wet, tearing sounds in the living room finally stopped. There was a polite knock on the bedroom door. "Thank you for your generosity." The monster's voice came through the wood, sounding deeply respectful. "You are truly a charismatic and high-ranking individual. Have you finished? Would you like to leave the instance together?" I stared at my reflection in my phone screen. High-ranking? Charismatic? I had no idea why it thought that, and as a newbie, I wasn't going to risk asking. I made sure my disguise was still perfect, covered my aunt with a blanket so she wouldn't be seen, and stepped out, closing the door firmly behind me. The monster stood there, blood staining its chin and collar. It was full. "Yes," I said, grabbing my backpack from the sofa. The safest bet was to follow its lead. I remembered a post I'd seen on a forum before entering, a player's last words. They mentioned having 10 minutes left after the game ended. I suspected there was a short window for revival or cleanup, and I didn't want to be around if my cousin came back. With his personality, he'd try to take me down with him. The monster walked to the window. "The ghost tram is here," it said. "You should hurry. 1 minute left." I looked down. Parked in front of the fruit stand downstairs was something. It wasn't a bus. It looked like a giant, furry green head of a monster, supported by a few bony protrusions at the neck. Its mouth was shut tight, and 4 eyes rolled around in their sockets. I watched a small doll-like creature hop toward it. The head opened its mouth, revealing a row of velvet chairs and small round tables inside. "Oh, I'm out of time," the monster said, checking the clock. "I can't wait for you. It was a pleasure working with you. Goodbye." It turned, unlocked the front door, and vanished into the pitch-black hallway. I moved to follow, but then, that clear, feminine voice rang out in my head again. "Congratulations, player Lin Yuan. You have passed the newbie instance. You have returned to the real world. Rewards will be issued in 10 minutes. The weirdos of the Carnival Orchestra look forward to seeing you again." The front door was still open, but the hallway was different now. The darkness was gone, replaced by the warm, yellow glow of the apartment lights. A shiver ran down my spine. The hallway I just saw, and this one weren't in the same world. If I had followed the monster, I might never have come back. I looked back at the living room. The mess was still there, the overturned chairs, the broken plates. My cousin was lying on the sofa, unconscious, but his chest was starting to move. He was about to wake up. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my admission letter and bolted down the stairs as quietly as I could. I left the door open. Closing it would only wake him up faster. A few minutes after I reached the street, my cousin jerked awake on the sofa. He sat up, gasping. At that same moment, the cold, feminine voice spoke to him, and only him. "We are sorry. You have failed the newbie instance. The weirdo has consumed all of your life energy. You have 10 minutes to write your final words and settle your affairs." My cousin's last memory was the agonizing pain in his back and his mother's screams. He stood up, shaking, looking at the empty, messy room. He was already dead. He just didn't know it yet. A few seconds later, the bedroom door creaked open. My aunt stood there, looking completely lost. The moment she saw my cousin sitting on the sofa, she let out a piercing wail. She rushed forward and threw her arms around him, sobbing uncontrollably. She told him she had been scared to death, that she'd had a horrible nightmare where he had died. My cousin didn't hug her back. He shoved her away with all his strength, his eyes burning with pure, unadulterated hatred. He grabbed her by the collar and slapped her across the face so hard the sound echoed. I was already outside, hidden in the shadows of the apartment complex. There were no subway stations nearby, so I had found a secluded spot to call a taxi. The app showed the car was 300 meters away. The walls in these old buildings were thin, which was perfect for me. I stood there in the dark, listening to the chaos I had left behind. "Why didn't you believe me?" my cousin screamed. His voice was loud enough to pierce through the entire neighborhood. "I told you I was going to die. You watched me die. You had the game card, but you didn't believe me. Now it's too late. I'm actually going to die." Then came the crashing sounds. It sounded like he was smashing everything in sight. Upstairs, my aunt's face was a mask of confusion. She remembered the dream. It had felt so real, so physical. She looked at her son, then at the wreckage of the dining room. Except for the fact that her son was standing in front of her, the scene was identical to the nightmare. She couldn't even remember how she'd ended up in bed. She thought she might be hallucinating. She vaguely recalled a voice mentioning an instance and rewards, but she was too terrified to think clearly. She was paralyzed, trying to convince herself that this wasn't happening. I watched the taxi headlights get closer. I listened for footsteps in the stairwell, but there were none. It was quiet now. My aunt was likely drowning in her own fear, refusing to accept that she was about to lose her son for the second time tonight. Upstairs, her lips trembled as she gripped my cousin's arm. She asked him where his father was. She told him there were two of them in her dream and begged to know which one was really him. That was the final straw. My cousin snapped. He started swinging, his fists hitting her face over and over. He was hysterical, screaming through tears and snot. He cursed her for not opening the envelope. He told her she had killed him. He asked her why she wasn't the one dying instead. The taxi pulled up. I took one last look at the building, hopped in, and shut the door. As the car pulled away, leaving the screams behind, I finally let out a long, shaky breath. I checked my phone, booked the next train to Anwu City, and leaned back. My university was there. It was the safest place for me to go. I watched the city lights flicker past the window, trying to force my shoulders to relax. I wondered if the game would involve the police once my cousin actually died, but I didn't care. I wanted nothing to do with that family ever again. 8 minutes later, that feminine voice returned. I sat bolt upright, clutching my backpack. "Congratulations again, Lin Yuan. You have successfully cleared the instance. Who is the crown prince? Your methods were creative, and the results are commendable." The voice began to list the statistics. 3 players entered. 2 survived. 1 died. So, my aunt had lived, and my cousin was the one who paid the price. I thought about the blood on the dining table and felt a surge of nausea. The driver glanced back to check on me, but I just waved him off, focusing on the voice. "You ranked first with the highest score. Your basic rewards are as follows: 10 rest days." A cold weight settled in my stomach. 10 days. That meant in 10 days, I'd be dragged back into another death trap. This wasn't a one-time thing, it was my new reality. The voice told me I could choose to enter an instance early if I wanted, but I wasn't that insane. Newbie encouragement bonus, 50,000 yuan. The funds have been deposited into your account. Now that I liked. I opened my banking app, and my heart skipped a beat. My balance had jumped from a few thousand to nearly 60,000. My tuition and living expenses for the first year of college were covered. I stared at the numbers, refreshing the screen just to make sure they were real. The voice continued, explaining that I could convert my balance into horror currency for the Carnival Orchestra world. The main currencies were ancient gold, silver, and copper coins. The exchange rate was 1-to-1. 1 yuan for 1 copper coin. It was simple, but the voice warned me the rate was only this low because the worlds were just beginning to merge. I was told I could check a map in my player center to find something called a morning hall to exchange my money. I wondered if these halls were like banks. So far, the sudden death incidents had only been reported in this region, but I realized the scale of this thing was much bigger than I thought. "I will now announce your remaining rewards," the voice said. I leaned in, listening intently. Player level, level 1. You are fragile, but you have sprouted. Acting ability, level 4. You are on the right track. I felt a small spark of excitement about the level up, but it was quickly replaced by dread. Higher levels meant stronger monsters. The forums said the newbie instance was easy. If that was easy, I didn't want to know what was coming in 10 days. And finally, you have a very special reward. The taxi was speeding toward the South Railway Station. My heart hammered against my ribs. In the newbie instance, we implemented an ability stripping mechanism. This is the only chance for most players to acquire multiple abilities. The players who were stripped will never know you took them. I froze. I had stripped the abilities from my aunt and cousin. A strange, gray sense of pleasure washed over me. It was a thrill I couldn't explain, the feeling of surviving death and coming out stronger. I reached into my pocket and felt the cold metal of my aunt's player badge and her ability card. They were still there. The station was in sight now, with long lines forming at the entrance. I had time. I wasn't in a rush anymore. I looked down at my hand, waiting for the final words of the broadcast, ready to see what I had become. The driver turned around and muttered a warning. I looked out the window and saw the flashing lights. We were approaching a checkpoint. Armed police stood under the streetlights, their faces grim. They were checking the left palms of every passenger. They were looking for the mark. I felt a surge of panic. My left hand carried the brand of a player. If they saw it, I was finished. I took a deep breath and activated my acting ability. I focused all my will on my palm. I watched as the black bird tattoo dissolved like ink in water, vanishing beneath my skin. I didn't know if the 1-hour limit worked the same way outside the game, but it was my only shot. The system voice hummed in my ear again. It spoke of food chains and rankings. High-ranking players could devour those beneath them. Then, a prompt flashed in my mind. The system asked if I wanted to strip the ability complaint from my aunt. I didn't hesitate. I thought about how she had treated me. I stared at the yes icon. The ability was mine now. It hit level 3 instantly. Then came my cousin's ability. Bully. I took that one too. A wave of cold, dark pleasure washed over me. It was addictive. It was the thrill of taking power from those who had tried to destroy me. I had to squeeze my hand shut to stop the trembling. I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't let the addiction take over. The taxi pulled up to the officers. A young cop leaned in and asked to see my hand. My heart hammered against my ribs. He didn't just look at it. He pulled out a bottle of makeup remover and a cotton pad. He scrubbed my palm hard, looking for hidden ink. My breath hitched, but the acting skill held firm. There was nothing but clear skin. I played the part of a confused student perfectly. I showed him my digital ID and my admission letter for Manhwa University. He smiled, handed back my phone, and waved us through. I was clear. I reached the South Railway Station with 15 minutes to spare. I didn't look back. I ran for the platform and boarded my train just as the doors hissed shut. Back in that cramped apartment, the nightmare was just beginning for my aunt. The uncle monster was gone, leaving her alone with the cold reality of her son's body. She finally realized it wasn't a dream. Her screams filled the building until the neighbors called the police. When the officers arrived, she grabbed one by the sleeve. She was hysterical. She told them I killed her son. She told them I wasn't her nephew, but a monster who could change his face. The older officer didn't look surprised at first. He had seen players before. But when she described how I had transformed into her son to trick her, his expression shifted. He asked for my name. I was already miles away, watching the dark countryside blur past the train window. I bought a cup of hot milk tea from the attendant. The warmth felt like a shield against the memories of blood and screams. I needed to relax. I needed to wash the scent of death out of my mind. I leaned back and stared at my left palm for 3 seconds. The world around me didn't change, but a digital interface flickered into my vision. The player center. It had everything: forums, a marketplace, and a map of the horrors to come. I opened my profile. My avatar was a disturbing oil painting of my own face, looking like melting wax. My real name, Lin Yuan, was displayed in bold letters. It was too risky. I couldn't have my real name tied to a player account. I focused on the text until it went blank. A prompt asked for a new nickname. I needed something that wouldn't leave a trail. Would you like to hear what happens when I enter the player forum for the first time? I didn't hesitate. I deleted my real name and typed in a new handle, user deleted. It was perfect. If I decided to cause a little chaos later, nobody would even know who to report on the forums. Next, I stared at my avatar for 3 seconds. The world around me blurred, replaced by a flickering red camera icon in the center of my vision. Most of the advanced features were still locked, but I could change my profile picture. I pulled my jacket tight around my head to block out the train's fluorescent lights and closed my eyes. I snapped a photo of pure, absolute darkness. A notification popped up in bright red. Avatar successfully updated. Now, looking at my profile, No one could tell if I was a living player or a ghost in the machine. I leaned back, sipping my tea, and checked my left palm. Over an hour had passed since I left that house, and my skin was still perfectly clear. No player mark. I felt a surge of relief. My minor ability to hide the tattoo wasn't just limited to the game world. It worked out here, too. 100 miles away, inside a brightly lit police station, a young officer named Guan was feeling far less relaxed. He stood in a meeting room, his brow furrowed as he recalled our brief encounter earlier that evening. He looked at the two senior detectives sitting across from my aunt and an older officer. "I'm certain he didn't have the mark," Guan said, his voice steady. "The lighting was perfect. I even used makeup remover to wipe his palm, just to be sure." He looked terrified, like a deer in headlights. He tapped the documents on the table. He showed me his ID and his university acceptance letter. It all checked out. My aunt's head snapped up. University acceptance letter? Her voice was a jagged shard of glass, cutting through the heavy silence of the room. He was supposed to stay here and work. What university? That little brat lied to me. "You didn't know?" Guanan asked, genuinely surprised. "Aren't you his guardian?" One of the detectives nudged him, whispering that the family situation was complicated, and told him to stop provoking her. But my aunt was already spiraling. She started screaming, her face contorting with a bitterness that bordered on insanity. "That little animal killed my whole family," she shrieked. "I should have gutted him years ago. Letting him finish high school was an act of mercy. I only let him stay so he could get a high-paying factory job and give us the money. Now he's sneaking off to college. He traded my son's life for his own." Guanan looked back down at the file, trying to ignore her. He read the report on my uncle. The man had dropped dead in a cheap hotel earlier that afternoon. Because he had checked in for a short stay, his body wasn't found by the cleaning staff until 7 in the evening. By the time the police identified him, the instance at the house had already started, and my aunt's phone was unreachable. "I don't care about the law," my aunt wailed, her logic completely gone. "He murdered my son. It was that game card. My son kept talking about it. Lin Yuan must have sent it to him to drag him down. Why didn't I get one instead?" The officers ignored her and focused on the surveillance footage. It showed me leaving the apartment twice that day. The first time, I picked up a package containing my university letter and a small black envelope. The second time, I grabbed groceries. The footage was clear. I had opened a second black envelope and calmly tucked the game card and badge into my pocket. The senior detective stood up. The victim, the son, was still in high school. There's no record of him receiving a package. Based on the mother's statement, he likely obtained a card through other means and bound it to himself. Guanan's expression darkened. He realized what he was dealing with. If the aunt's story was true, I wasn't a victim. I was a player with incredible psychological strength. I had survived a low-probability newbie instance, kept my cool, and vanished before the police could blink. I had likely used my aunt and cousin as pawns to ensure my own survival. "He's dangerous," the detective muttered. "What's his power? Shapeshifting? Illusion? It doesn't matter. We've already alerted the authorities in Anwu City. The moment his train pulls into the station, he's finished." He looked at Guanan. "Get ready. We're heading to Anwu in 10 minutes to coordinate the arrest." Back on the train, I was oblivious to the manhunt. I was busy reading my upgraded skill descriptions. My first skill, Actor, had reached level 4. I could now mimic the behavior of weirdos up to level 4, making them think I was one of them. There was no time limit. I could also subtly shift my aura to deceive other players. Even better, I could now hide my player tattoo for an hour and a half during an instance. My second skill, Grudge, was at level 3. I could verbally assault a target, blaming them for my misfortunes, to drain their mental strength and sap their power. It was incredibly effective. I remembered how I had used it to break my cousin's will back in the house. It was simple, cruel, and honestly, a little bit fun. I took another sip of my milk tea, wondering when I'd get to test these out again. Suddenly, a sweet, feminine voice echoed in my head, making me jump. "Hello, player. An instance has been detected that you are eligible to enter." I looked around the crowded train car. "Now, I just finished one." After the instance, "Who is the Crown Prince?" ended, the voice continued smoothly. "A surviving player has caused trouble for you. Your actions have drawn high-level attention from human authorities, and a pursuit has been authorized. In 6 hours, The instance cat and mouse will begin. The location, high-speed train G3075. Do you wish to participate? I stared at the empty air. Someone was hunting me. High-level attention? I realized my aunt must have told the police everything. She was blaming me for her son's death, and now the cops were closing in. The game wasn't over. It was just moving to a faster track. If I stayed and joined this instance, could I wipe away the mess waiting for me in the real world? Could I avoid a cold room and a long interrogation at the police station? I asked the system these questions in my head, but the sweet voice didn't answer. It just repeated the same cold prompt. Please make your choice immediately. I didn't have much of a choice, really. If I didn't enter the instance, I'd have to face the authorities head-on, and the consequences would be far worse. The game was dangerous, sure, but it offered information and rewards. I remembered the feeling I got when the last rewards were issued, a strange, almost addictive rush. No, I whispered to myself, stay normal. Keep it together. I squeezed my palm, using the sting of pain to focus my mind. The player has accepted, the voice announced. You will enter the instance cat and mouse in 6 hours. Monster level, level 3 weirdos. I felt a wave of relief. My mimicry skill was already at level 4, and my grudge skill was level 3. Both were strong enough to handle level 3 threats. I wondered what form the weirdos would take this time. The mission objective appeared. Reach Onmu North Station without being caught by the police. Maintain your hidden identity. Time limit, none. Location, high-speed train G3075, carriage 7. I looked around. I was currently sitting in carriage 7. The lighting was soft, the seats were plush, and everything looked perfectly normal. It didn't feel like a horror show yet. I took a deep breath, forcing my stomach muscles to relax. I needed to stay calm to keep my edge. While I waited, I checked my final skill, Bully, level 2. It allowed me to use physical violence to make a target feel weak and exhausted. It wasn't effective against level 3 monsters or high-level players, but it was better than a standard fist fight. A punch only hits one spot, but this skill could drain a person's entire body. I leaned back and opened the player forum. It was still mostly empty, though I noticed more profile pictures had turned gray, more deaths. I was searching for info on weirdos. In my last game, the monster had been strangely polite to me. He even called me charming. That couldn't be a coincidence. If I could figure out what triggered that behavior, I could use it to survive the train. At 10 p.m., the main lights dimmed, leaving only the faint glow of the floor lamps. I huddled by the window and finished my milk tea. I noticed a search icon had appeared on the forum. I focused on it and typed weirdo. Nothing. No posts, just one player with the username weirdo, whose profile was completely blank. It seemed I was on my own. I scrolled through the general comments instead, wading through a sea of despair. A weirdo ate my mom, one post read. The monsters are unbeatable, said another. Finally, I found something useful in a help thread. A player wrote, in my instance, we faced a group of weirdos. I noticed they have a strict hierarchy. The high-level ones command the low-level ones. We focused all our strength on killing one high-level monster and used his authority to control the level 1s. We survived. That caught my interest. Why did the monster in my first game treat me like an equal or even a superior? Was it because my mimicry was level 3 at the time? No, mimicry only hides you. It doesn't grant status. I closed my eyes and replayed every detail of the Crown Prince instance. Outside, the dark landscape blurred past. In another carriage, a man named Guan Un was struggling to keep his eyes open. He was staring at the empty seat next to him, a bad feeling gnawing at his gut. He was a cop, and he was heading to Onwu City to intercept me. He had taken the high-speed rail to beat me there, but things were going wrong. His boss, who usually suffered from insomnia, had fallen into a death-like sleep in the taxi. When he woke up, he was covered in cold sweat and acting terrified. Now, his boss had been in the train's bathroom for 30 minutes. Guanan tried to stand up to check on him, but the exhaustion was too much. His world went black as he slumped into his seat. Back in carriage 7, I opened my eyes. I had a theory. When the monster first entered the room in my last game, he was cold and indifferent. His attitude only changed after I transformed into my cousin right in front of him. To a weirdo, the ability to shift shapes wasn't just a trick, It was a trait of a powerful entity. If I wanted the monsters on this train to stay back, I had to show them I was one of them. I had to find a way to get a weirdo alone and prove my status. I let out a long breath. Having a plan made the fear fade. I set an alarm on my phone, leaned my head against the seat, and let myself fall into a deep, dreamless sleep. At 4 a.m., the vibration of my phone woke me. I headed to the bathroom to wash my face, moving quietly through the silent car. Most passengers were still asleep. I looked at the rows of people, wondering how many of them were about to be dragged into the nightmare with me. The people who were awake looked calm. They didn't look like players. Outside the window, the world was still a void of deep, heavy black. I finished washing up and stepped out of the bathroom. Instead of staying in carriage 7, I started walking toward the back of the train. I knew the police were hunting me. I knew they planned to surround the train at the next stop. The officers on the ground had no idea what was coming, but I did. If I wanted to move unnoticed, I needed a disguise. A flight attendant uniform was my best bet. Night shift crews are small. My carriage didn't even have one assigned to it. I kept walking until I reached the very last car, carriage 15. The train was long. If the police started a room-by-room search, they'd likely start from the front or middle. By the time they reached the end, I'd be long gone. Plus, if I wore a uniform from carriage 15 while hiding in carriage 7, nobody would recognize me as a missing staff member from their own section. At the junction between carriage 14 and 15, I spotted a young woman in uniform. She was leaning against the wall, looking exhausted. "Hello," I said softly. I kept my voice polite, but my eyes were sharp, memorizing every detail of her posture. She jumped a little, startled by my sudden appearance. She forced a tired smile and turned to face me. "Hello, is there something I can help you with?" I glanced at her chest. Her name tag read Zhongli. I filed that name away. I watched how she shifted her weight and how she held her hands. I needed to become her. "I was just wondering where the dining car is," I said, using a casual, hungry tone. "I'm starving." She let out a small laugh. "The dining car is way up in carriage 6. You're walking the wrong way. But they don't start serving breakfast until 6 a.m. She glanced at her watch. It was exactly 4 a.m. I didn't move. I just stayed there, staring at her with a lingering look. In service jobs, silence and a steady gaze usually make people keep talking to fill the awkwardness. I needed more information. I needed to know their schedule so I wouldn't get caught in a lie later. "We have instant noodles for now," she added kindly when I didn't leave. "If you're really that hungry, you can grab some there." "Do you guys have to wait until 6 o'clock to eat too?" I asked. "We work in shifts," she replied casually. "I've already eaten." "Perfect. Shifts." The game was set to start at 5 a.m. I needed to know exactly when the night shift ended. If I showed up as a night worker when the day shift was supposed to be on duty, I'd be caught instantly. "That sounds rough," I sighed, pushing for more. "The trip is over 10 hours long. Don't you guys get any sleep?" She smiled, clearly taking me for a curious, friendly college student. "We do. We rotate for rest too. For example, I get to go off duty and sleep at 6 a.m. That was everything I needed. The night crew went to bed at 6 o'clock. That meant I could safely maintain the disguise until then without being questioned by other staff. There were so few of them at night that most junctions, like the one between carriage 7 and 8, were completely unguarded. "Thanks. Get some rest soon," I said with a polite nod. I turned and walked back. The game started in 30 minutes. Once I was sure no one was watching, I slipped back into a bathroom. 5 minutes later, a young woman in a neat uniform stepped out. Her face carried the heavy, authentic exhaustion of someone who had been working all night. 30 minutes earlier, under the cover of the pitch-black night, another train had pulled into a different station. Guan jolted awake, his forehead drenched in cold sweat. A voice from his dream was still echoing in his head, droning on about ability loading complete. He felt like he'd been brainwashed and turned to his boss sitting next to him. "Sir, you okay?" His boss's eyes were hollow and dark. He was staring straight ahead, his facial muscles twitching in an unnatural, rigid way. As the station announcement crackled over the speakers, passengers began to stand and gather their luggage. His boss suddenly grabbed Guan's arm with crushing force. He pulled him into the crowd. "Don't just sit there. We're getting off." The boss's voice sounded normal, but there was an underlying wrongness to it. The local team is already here to meet us. Sure enough, officers in uniform were waiting on the platform, some holding leashed police dogs. We'll go find Lin Yuan in an hour, the boss said with a strange, hidden glee. I'm so hungry. To a high-level monster, a level 1 player tasted slightly better than a newbie. Guanin was his first choice. If not him, a level 0 player or a regular human would have to do. What did you say? Guanin asked, shivering. The boss craned his neck around to look at him, then smoothly flashed his ID to the local officers. I said I'm hungry. He had already devoured the real man who owned this skin, but the hunger was never ending. He took 2 breakfast bags from a colleague and handed one to Guanin. Eat up, then we're getting on that train to find our guy. Sorry, sir. The local officer apologized. The breakfast spots aren't open yet, so this is all we could find. Inside the plastic bag, tucked between the bread and the milk, lay a silent, black envelope. Time ticked away. The announcement for the next stop echoed through my train. It was 5 a.m. The cat and mouse game had officially begun. I stood by the door in my uniform, watching the platform as we pulled in. About 20 officers were scattered outside. Their black uniforms were impossible to miss. As I looked closer, I recognized a face. It was the young cop who had checked my ID the night before. Even from a distance, I could tell something was wrong. His face was pale. His jaw was locked tight. He looked like a man staring at his own execution. Yesterday, he had been smug and casual. Now, just a few hours later, he looked terrified. He was definitely a new player, chosen during the night for this beta test. Standing next to him was an older officer. That man's expression was cold as ice. His eyes were empty pits of pure hunger. I felt my muscles tensed instinctively. A weirdo. The train hissed to a stop. Please remain seated until the train has fully stopped, the automated voice chimed. A few passengers stood up with their bags, looking confused by the heavy police presence outside. Why are there so many cops? I muttered, perfectly mimicking the worried confusion of the other passengers. The door slid open. Guanin pushed his way inside immediately. Police business. Everyone stay where you are. Do not leave the train. The passengers started to panic. I jumped in, acting the part of the helpful staff member, ushering people back to their seats and keeping the peace. After a few minutes, the chaos subsided. Guanin shot me, the young female attendant, a look of pure gratitude. He looked exhausted. He had barely had time to open his own black envelope in the station bathroom. He seemed relieved that the situation was under control. I caught that look of relief. I immediately reacted, letting my forehead crease with worry and making my hands tremble slightly. This was Guanin's first game. He was likely the cat in this cat and mouse setup. If I wanted to survive, I needed to win his trust and figure out his mission. By then, the older officer, the monster, had entered the carriage. He didn't care about the crowd. He gave me a brief, indifferent glance, recognizing me as a fellow entity, then looked away. I shuffled over to Guanin's side, my lips trembling as I whispered, "Officer, please, do I really have to stay here? I don't feel very well. Can I?" I let my voice trail off, making it weak and thin. Guanin looked me over. As the young female attendant, I looked exhausted. My eyes were brimming with tears, and my face was twisted with a fear I couldn't quite put into words. It was the exact same expression he had worn back on the platform. I saw a flash of suspicion in his eyes. He wasn't sure if I was a fellow newbie player or the weirdo who could change shapes. But he probably figured the weirdo wouldn't know about this police operation. Plus, the files at the station said players usually got 10 days of rest after their first instance. "Where does it hurt?" Guanin asked. His eyes lingered on my chest for a second. He was checking my ID badge. The name, Zhongli, was printed clearly on it in a standard format. Seeing that small detail made him relax his guard just a little. I started to tremble. I think I'm just so tired. I'm hearing things. I mimicked the real Zhang Li's tone perfectly. There's a voice. It won't stop talking in my head. "Officer, I think I'm going to throw up." Guanin winced. He remembered the echoing female voice that wouldn't stop in his own mind. The brainwashing part matched his experience. My face grew even paler, and I let my palms break out in a cold sweat. I reached into my pocket. My fingers brushed against my aunt's player badge, her ability card, and that black envelope. I hadn't had time to get rid of them, but now they were the perfect props for my lie. Guanin seemed convinced. He probably thought that if I were faking it, I'd be too obvious. I'd be shouting about being pulled into a game. He'd seen suspects before who tried to gain trust with perfectly logical, detailed stories. But I was acting frantic, dazed, and incoherent. I looked like someone who had just suffered a mental breakdown. He glanced toward the door. His colleagues were standing guard, and his superior was busy checking the carriages. Strangely, the other passengers looked calm. They hadn't been pulled into the game. Was this attendant his only teammate? Miss, Guanin whispered. When did the voices start? Did you receive something? I let out a small, dry heave, just like my aunt did when she first entered the instance. I just made myself look a bit smarter than her. I heard it while I was working. There was something, a black thing. I made my skin look even more ghostly. Officer, I can't describe it. It's too complicated. Show it to me. Guanin interrupted, frowning. Don't panic. I know what's happening. Those voices mentioned a mission, right? What is it? He was in a hurry. He didn't have time for a therapy session. He needed to verify my mission so he could take command. In this game of cat and mouse, he was the cat, and I was the mouse. He assumed anyone else would either be helping the cat or had a simpler task. With trembling fingers, I placed a single gold coin into his palm. I knew what he was doing. He wanted to figure out my power and mission to make a move that benefited the cat side. Fine, I'd play along. I couldn't show him my aunt's ability card, though. That would blow my cover instantly. Is it this? I asked. There was a card, too. I put it in my bag during my break. I found these things when Do you remember your mission? Guanin snapped. He didn't want the backstory. I pretended to hesitate for a second. In that moment, I glanced into the carriage. The great man, the monster, had found my empty seat. Unlike the lower-level monsters, this one tilted his head and sniffed the air. He was tracking a scent. Then, he turned and walked straight toward carriage 8. A level 3 monster. They have a sharp sense of smell. But he didn't come back for me. He was following the path I had already walked. Could my transformation mask my scent too? I felt a prickle of alarm. I focused my mind, willing my human scent to disappear, then turned my attention back to the officer. My mission? I looked appropriately confused. The words were, something about assisting? Cooperating with the police to catch the mouse. Officer, do you know what's going on? I was positioning myself as a teammate of the cat. It was the safest place to be. We're looking for someone, Guanin said. Carriage 7. A young man, about 18 or 19. Long hair. Very good looking. Have you seen him? Guanin had noticed the monster's movements too. He looked into carriage 7, but of course, my real face wasn't there. He wasn't worried yet. The train was surrounded. Nobody could get out. He looked back at me and saw the cold sweat on my forehead. I have seen him. I stammered, looking like I was about to cry. I talked to him, but I don't understand. Guanin's eyes lit up. A witness. This was a massive lead. He opened his mouth to ask more, but I grabbed his sleeve, acting like a woman who had lost her grip on reality. I needed to confirm his mission now. Officer, does this mean all of this is real? I looked at the retreating back of the monster and cut him off before he could speak. Do you have a mission too? Is yours the same as mine? Guanin saw me as a drowning person clinging to a life raft. It's real, he said softly. You have to finish the mission. He tried to comfort me. Don't worry. Our missions are basically the same. Mine is to help my companion finish the task and stay alive. My mind raced through a dozen possibilities in a split second. This guy's mission was a death trap. As a cop, his companion was the monster. But in the game, his companion should have been me, another player. If he confused the two, he was dead. I almost felt bad for him. He was actually trying to be nice to a female attendant who was actually the very person he was supposed to hunt. I nodded, my eyes red, pretending to pull myself together. I understand, I said. So we both have to find that guy the police want. I threw in a newbie question to keep the act alive. But who is that great man they mentioned on the radio? Honestly, I didn't care if Guanin lived or died. I just needed a way out of here with a solid identity. Yes, we find the guy, Guanin nodded. He watched as the monster stopped in front of the bathroom. To Guanin, the monster was his boss and his partner. He thought the goal was to team up with the monster to catch me. It was a brutal game, but that's how these things worked. He probably thought he could use his powers to make sure I wasn't eaten by the monster when I was caught. I talked to him around 4 in the morning, I said, getting back to the facts of my encounter with myself. He was making small talk. He asked me where the dining car was. He also asked about the shift changes, and when we get to go off duty to eat and rest. I told him exactly when the shift changes happened, I said, watching Guanin's face. He was focused, his brow furrowed as he processed the information. He started walking toward the other end of the train, heading for carriage 15. I glanced back at the gap between carriage 8 and 9 where the bathroom was. The monster, the great man, had just stepped inside. He'd be out any second. My plan was simple. Let this idiot Guanin go chase ghosts while I dealt with the monster. I needed to get what I wanted and vanish. Guanin seemed to reach a conclusion. To him, the Lin Yuan he was hunting was clever. Based on my story, he figured I was looking for shift change info, so I could steal a uniform and blend in. Heading to carriage 15 made sense too. It was the furthest point away. Guanin didn't waste another second. He started marching toward the far end of the train. I followed, jogging slightly to keep up, but my eyes were locked on the monster. The monster emerged from the bathroom, looking frustrated. He hadn't found anything. Guanin stopped in his tracks and called out, "Leader, the target should be in carriage 15. We need to move now." Guanin was looking directly at the monster's face. I saw my opening. While Guanin was distracted, I reached out and gave the monster's sleeve a hard tug. I couldn't let him leave yet. This thing was too useful. The monster felt the pull and twisted his neck around to look at me. This was it. I took a step back, pretending to be terrified, making sure the monster's massive body blocked Guanin's line of sight. In that split second, I let my face shift. I dropped the disguise and showed him my real face, the face of Lin Yuan. The monster froze. His head stopped turning. He stared at me as I shifted back into the female attendant. A flicker of confusion and genuine awe crossed his stiff, rubbery face. "Are you the leader?" I whispered, my voice heavy with implication. I needed him to follow me. "I'll take you to see the surveillance footage." The monster's dark, hollow eyes bored into mine. He was trying to understand. A fellow weirdo who could mimic the target perfectly? It shouldn't have been possible. Usually, they only had as many faces as the skins they had collected. Had this level 1 player he was hunting already been skinned by someone else in just a few hours? The monster looked disappointed, but he didn't attack. I stood there on the soft carpet, my heart hammering against my ribs. I couldn't let this slip. I had to keep him on my rhythm. "Leader," Guanin called out, getting impatient. He stepped forward and grabbed the monster's arm. "Let's go. If we don't move now, we'll lose him." Guanin actually looked concerned for me. He thought I was just a clueless NPC who didn't realize the great man was a man-eating horror. He probably thought his level 3 powers could save me later if things got ugly. Guanin pulled the monster again. "Zhongli, listen to me. You stay here in carriage 7 and wait." "Shut up and mind your own business," I cursed silently. Without the info in this monster's head, I'd never get off this train. If I played this right, I could use the monster to screw with the cops one more time. I looked at the monster again, giving him a sharp, meaningful look. I mouthed the words, "Stay here." The monster stared at me for a long time. He looked at my hollow eyes, my stiff posture, and the faint scent of rot and rubber that I was projecting. To him, I was the real deal, a high-level weirdo just like him, only smarter and better at acting. He probably thought I was a higher rank because I had already claimed the target's skin. The monster pulled his mouth into a disgruntled sneer, but he ultimately submitted. He turned to Guanin. "You take the others to carriage 15 and secure the suspect. I'm going to check the monitors." I felt a surge of relief. The trick worked. Guanin hesitated. "What about this attendant? Let her come with me." I said move. The monster snapped, his voice turning sharp and grating. Passengers started peeking over their seats. "Go. Now." Guanin went quiet. He weighed his options, gritted his teeth, and finally turned toward carriage 15. His mission was to help his companion, and right now, he viewed the monster as his partner. He wanted to catch the rat and minimize casualties. "Zhongli, stay safe," Guanin called out over his shoulder. I gave a quick nod and immediately hurried the monster toward carriage 6. We had made too much noise. The guards outside were already poking their heads in. If I tried to interrogate him in the bathroom here, I was dead. You stupid thing, I hissed under my breath, activating my complaining talent. Why are you wandering around like a headless fly? Is that a brain in your skull, or just a pile of wet noodles? I pulled him through the doors into carriage 6. It was empty except for 2 guards at the far end. I kept up the pace, whispering curses the whole way. This carnival is a joke. You're going to get me killed. You better have the answers I need. We reached the bathroom between carriage 6 and 5. I checked the hallway, shoved the monster inside, and slammed the door shut behind us. The power of my complaining was taking a toll on him. His legs were wobbling like soft rubber. His face was a mix of ravenous hunger and pure, unadulterated fear. His simple monster brain couldn't process what was happening. He just felt an overwhelming pressure from a superior being. He looked miserable, convinced he had offended someone way out of his league. How? How have I offended you? The monster asked weakly. I didn't answer. Time was running out. I needed to squeeze him for everything he knew. Too many questions, I snapped, hitting him with another small complaint. He withered further. Who is the leader in charge of this operation? Enro. The monster looked confused. This wasn't the kind of conversation weirdos usually had. Shouldn't we be talking about who gets to eat first? But he didn't dare lie. His name is Lu Mingli, the monster rasped. What's his rank? Director. Is he on the train? The monster shook his head. No. Is he at a meeting out of town? Or is he local, supervising the work? Local, the monster said. Perfect. That made things easier. I started frisking the monster, my hands moving fast. I pulled an ID badge and a cell phone out of his pockets. What are you doing? He asked, trembling. Don't worry about it, I said. I tucked the ID badge and the cell phone into my pocket. I knew the clock was ticking, and I had to move fast. A rookie player is going to come looking for you soon, I told the monster, my voice cold and commanding. By the way, what's his name? Guan, the monster rasped. I burned the name into my memory. Without hesitation, I decided to throw Guan onto the wolves. Or in this case, the weirdo. It was a calculated move to keep the monster occupied. Fine. Guan is your food, I said. The monster's stiff expression shifted. The crushing weight of my complaints seemed to lift slightly from his simple brain. He looked genuinely surprised, his eyes gleaming with a twisted sort of joy. I actually get food, he muttered. I caught that flicker of excitement, but I didn't let my guard down for a second. I had to keep the pressure on. Just play your part, I ordered. Act like his superior, just like usual. If he asks about me, tell him I took you to check the security monitors. The monster's grin widened, becoming oily and subservient. He nodded vigorously. You can count on me, sir. Don't you worry. Seeing he was in a good mood, I decided to strike while the iron was hot. I had one last question. These weirdos were terrifying, but most were simple-minded. They functioned on instinct and basic hierarchy. You're smart, I said, throwing him a bone to keep him cooperative. I like that. Tell me one more thing, and I'll make sure I don't touch your meal. How did you know my rank was higher than yours? You have skins, sir, the monster flattered, his voice trembling with awe. You can transform. To have 2 skins means you've survived 2 instances already. You've eaten at least 2 players. So that was it. He thought I was a high-level monster because I could mimic others. I realized he was treating me with such reverence because he thought I was a veteran predator. You have a natural voice, he continued, his tone full of envy. You have flexible expressions and perfect acting skills. Even though you don't smell rotten enough yet, the rest of you is far beyond what a normal weirdo can achieve. I nodded, absorbing the information. Stay in this bathroom, I commanded. In 5 minutes, if your food hasn't shown up, go to carriage 15 and find him. Tell him there's something in the security room. Lead him to the front of the train to check the footage. This was purely to buy time. I didn't know what Guanen's special ability was, and I didn't care if he was supposed to be my partner. In this game, the only rule was survival. My true mission was to avoid being caught by the police. If Guanen was a player, he'd have to figure it out himself. I couldn't afford to play hero. The air in the cramped bathroom was suffocating, smelling of rot and stagnant water. My insides were twisted in knots, and my breath was shallow. I wasn't calm, I was terrified, but I couldn't show it. The light flickered over the monster's face as he forced his muscles into a grotesque, distorted smile. Understood, he croaked. I'm truly fascinated by you, sir. I'll lead him to the monitors, and then I'll eat him. I felt a slight release of tension in my chest, though my body remained rigid. I gestured for him to stay put, then quickly pulled open the door. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, I shifted. I wasn't the arrogant cousin anymore. I was a uniformed police officer, phone pressed to my ear, looking like I was in the middle of an urgent call. The lights in the train flickered back on. I marched through the carriages, looking high-profile and busy. Passengers turned their heads as I passed, but I kept my chin up. I had to look like I belonged there. I had to look confident. I crossed carriage 5 and reached the junction. 2 real officers were stationed at the door. The familiar surge of panic hit me, but I forced my muscles to relax. If I was a cop, I had to act like one. I frowned at my blacked-out phone screen, sliding my thumb across it as if navigating a menu. I walked straight up to them. Director Lu Mingli is coming over personally, I said, my voice gruff and weathered, perfectly mimicking the Uncle Monster's tone. I narrowed my eyes, scanning the 2 officers with a sharp, authoritative glare. Look sharp, I barked. When Director Lu arrives, follow protocol. Check his ID thoroughly. Don't slack off. I could have used my complaint power to force my way out, but that would expose me instantly. These guards were in plain sight. If they acted weird, the whole station would be on me in seconds. My only way out was to act my way through. The 2 officers froze, looking stunned. They knew how much Lu Mingli cared about this case, but they hadn't expected him to show up in person. The director? When did this happen? One of them asked. Did he just call you? Just now. I grunted, looking annoyed. I didn't give them room for more questions. I pulled the ID badge I'd swiped from the monster and flashed it quickly. This is an exception. I'm going up to meet him. Remember, the suspect is cunning. I've already told Xiao Guan to notify the others. He's handling the inner perimeter. I paused, making sure my instructions were clear. You 2 stay here. Do not leave your post. Do not get distracted. The 2 officers glanced at each other. Seeing a senior officer who knew the director's name and held a valid badge, they didn't suspect a thing. And listen, I added, my heart hammering against my ribs. Anyone else who tries to pass, including Guanin, you stop them. Once they're on the train, they don't leave. Even if you have to let someone through, check their ID twice. Got it? Yes, sir. They responded in unison, their faces tightening with focus. I nodded once, took a step forward, and felt the solid ground of the platform beneath my boots. My heart skipped a beat. Every instinct told me to bolt, but I forced myself to maintain a steady, brisk pace. I headed for the exit stairs. The stairs descended deeper underground. Only when I was sure I was out of their line of sight did I take a massive, shaking breath and start to run. The station was eerily empty. Not a single soul was in sight. Advertisements on the walls buzzed and flickered, some of them broken. It felt wrong. This wasn't the real world. It was just like the fruit shop or the stairwell from my last nightmare. The exit tunnel felt miles long, stretched out by some invisible force. I cursed the game under my breath. It wasn't a trap or a loop. The path was just physically longer than it should be. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I just had to hope that Guanin would keep the others busy long enough for me to disappear. Meanwhile, back at carriage 15, Guanin was staring at the exit. He saw a crew member standing there, a man who looked, dressed, and moved exactly like the real Zhongli. Guanin felt a surge of adrenaline, thinking he'd finally found his lead. He had no idea he was walking straight into a trap. Guanin didn't hesitate. He lunged forward and grabbed the man's arm. The sudden movement terrified Zhongli. He spun around, eyes wide, instinctively trying to break free from the grip. To Guanin, this looked like a guilty man trying to bolt. He didn't take any chances. He activated his ability immediately. With a surge of power, Guanin pinned him down. Zhongli couldn't move an inch. He could only glare up at the officer, his face twisting with confusion and anger. Officer, what are you doing? Guanin let out a cold laugh. You're a good actor, Zhuyan. Hiding all the way back here in carriage 15. Most people wouldn't have found you. It's a massive coincidence that the attendant in carriage 7 is also a player in this instance. Guanin felt proud of himself. If the real Zhongli hadn't approached him earlier, He wouldn't have rushed straight to carriage 15. He would have wasted time checking the security feeds first. Zhongli looked completely lost. He opened his mouth, but it took a few seconds for the words to come out. Officer, what are you talking about? Who is Zhu Yan? What's going on? Another officer, a man named Wen Yan, hurried over to assist. Xiao Guan, did you find the suspect? Guanin glanced down at the immobilized Zhongli. This should be him. It's a long story. Zhongli finally caught on to the word suspect. Panic flared in his eyes. He wasn't some criminal. He was just a guy doing his job. I'm not Zhu Yan. I'm Zhongli. Officer, you've got the wrong person. I don't even know who that is. Guanin studied him. The performance was flawless. The man looked exactly like the person he'd met earlier. He decided to end the games. He pulled out his handcuffs and snapped them onto Zhongli's wrists, signaling for his colleague to help move him. This is likely our guy, Guanin said. But since we have two Zhonglis on one train, we can't be careless. Let's head to the front. Wen Yin stared at the man in handcuffs, his expression shifting from disbelief to shock. Holy crap, Xiaoguan. Someone actually has an ability like this. Wen Yin had read the case files, but he'd never seen a shapeshifter in person. Guanin just nodded. In his mind, one of the two had to be the real one. This wasn't the first time Zhu Yin had played tricks, but he was sure the kid had finally slipped up. Our people are guarding the exits, Guanin explained to his colleague as they started walking. He can't escape this train. The most direct way now is to check the surveillance footage. We need to confirm. Officer, I really am Zhongli, the man screamed, interrupting him. Zhongli had put the pieces together. This young cop thought an imposter had sneaked onto the train. But he knew who he was. He lived a quiet life. He hadn't committed any crimes. Desperate, Zhongli started blaring out his personal details. My household registration is in the Hengan district of Anwushi. I have my ID in my pocket. I've been on this high-speed rail for 4 days straight. I haven't left the route. I've been sleeping in the staff dorms. I haven't done anything wrong. Please, check my ID. Guanin froze. A bad feeling washed over him. Would a suspect really offer up their ID so willingly? Would the real Zhu Yan go this far? Or was his ability so broken that he could even forge official documents? Wen Yin didn't wait. He reached into Zhongli's pocket and pulled out a card. Look at this, he said, handing it to Guanin. The card looked perfect. The thickness, the gloss, the anti-counterfeiting holographic marks, it was all there. The name, Zhongli, was printed clearly in the center. Guanin's heart dropped. He snatched the card, flipping it over and over. The texture was right. Everything was right. Damn it, Guanin cursed under his breath. His face turned pale. He replayed the morning in his head. The Zhongli back in carriage 7 had shown a player badge, but he hadn't shown an ID card. Guanin remembered the files from last night. Zhu Yan had taken his aunt's player badge and her ability card. The reason that Zhongli hadn't shown an ID card was likely because the name on it wouldn't match. Guanin felt a chill. He had been played. A person in trouble usually tells the police everything. The fact that the first Zhongli had been so vague was the biggest red flag of all, and he had missed it. He's still on the train, Guanin barked, turning to Wen Yin. Bring him. We're going to the security room. Now, Wen Yin realized the gravity of the situation. He grabbed the pail, shaking Zhongli, and ran after Guanin. What happened, Xiaoguan? What do we do? While they were sprinting toward the front of the train, I was running for my life in the underground tunnel. I didn't know why the exit felt so far away. I was exhausted, my lungs burning with every breath. My right ribs felt like they were being stabbed with needles. I was only 20 meters from the ticket gate, but it felt like miles. I couldn't stop. The mission wasn't just to pass the gate. I had to leave the entire North Station. Who knew how much the extended distance would add to the walk once I was through? My legs felt like lead. The advertisements on the walls blurred into streaks of red. This was the game's way of trying to trap me, making the path longer just to slow me down. I collapsed and crawled the last few feet through the empty ticket gate. The floor was freezing. I forced myself up, transitioning from a run to a fast walk. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Finally, the tunnel ended. I looked around. The station looked normal. Liquor ads were glowing. The hall was clean. And there, at the exit, was bright, beautiful sunlight. I could see people walking by outside. A small spark of hope flared in my chest. I was so close. I started jogging again, pushing through the fatigue. Back on the train, Guanin was losing his mind. "We need those cameras," he muttered, his voice cold. "He's probably messing with the feeds to stall us. He wants us to get tired or let our guard down." He remembered the ant's testimony. Zhu Yan's ability was deceptive, but his actual combat power was weak. He didn't have the guts to attack a police officer directly. Guanin wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. Zhu Yan was slippery, but he wouldn't let him get away. I stood at the edge of the station, my chest heaving. The cool air of the North Station felt like ice in my burning lungs. I had to keep moving. I knew Guanin was back there, realizing exactly how I'd played him. Back on the train, Guanin was spiraling. I could imagine his face contorting as he talked to his colleagues. He knew I'd seen too many of them. His fellow officers knew my face, but the ones outside didn't. He remembered what my aunt had screamed about the night before, how I had supposedly sacrificed my own cousin to the great man, monster, just to save my own skin. He was terrified I'd do it again. If I blended into the crowd of travelers and sacrificed an innocent person to buy myself time, they'd be finished. Without the security cameras, I could become anyone. I could be his partner, his boss, or even him. Xiao Guan, one of his colleagues, stammered, grabbing a fellow officer named Zhang Li. "Is it possible? Is it possible he already changed his face and walked right out of here?" Guanin reached carriage 5 and glanced at the exit. The guards were still there, standing straight, looking professional. "Why would he leave?" Guanin muttered, frowning. "We have a rule. No one leaves the carriage. There's food, water, and toilets here. What excuse could he possibly have to go outside?" His colleague thought about it and nodded. "True. Don't stress too much. As long as he's on the train, we'll catch him." But Guanin was vibrating with anxiety. He knew now. He'd been played. Every word I'd said while pretending to be Zhang Li had been a lie designed to bait out his mission details. I'd lured him to carriage 15 just to buy myself a head start. If he didn't catch me soon, his mission would fail, and in this game, failure meant death. "Zhu Yan." Guanin hissed my name through gritted teeth. He turned a corner and slammed straight into the great man monster coming out of the bathroom. The impact sent Guanin stumbling. Under the warm yellow lights of the cabin, the monster's hollow, pitch-black eyes were wide with a ravenous hunger. It had been counting the seconds. 5 minutes were up, and it wanted its meal. The monster's mouth twitched into a stiff, grotesque smile. It was pleased. The high-level great man, me, in my disguise, had kept my word. I hadn't touched its fragrant food. Guanin didn't care about the monster's expression. He had enough power to protect himself. He grabbed the monster's arm, his voice urgent. "Where is she? The female flight attendant who was with you?" The monster remembered my instructions. I had told it that it could lead Guanin to the monitoring room to enjoy its feast. The creature licked its lips, its voice raspy. "He's in the monitoring room looking at the feeds." I came out early. Guanin's heart sank. The cameras. He didn't stop to check if the monster had already eaten someone. He didn't care about Zhang Li or his other colleagues. He bolted toward the front of the train. The monster watched his retreating back and licked its lips again. It took 2 steps to follow, but a confused voice came from the station platform outside the door. "Wait, Chief," a guarding officer called out, looking at the monster and then at the other police nearby. "You're back? When did you get back? You said Director Liu was coming. Where is he?" Inside the carriage, Guanin's colleague froze. He realized something was horribly wrong. He lunged forward and grabbed the guard. "Explain yourself. When did the chief go out?" Xiao Guan just said the chief has been on the train the whole time. He spun around to face the monster. "Chief, what Director Liu?" The monster's brain was sluggish. It was so hungry its stomach felt like it was disappearing. It didn't want to think about anything but meat. It knew a Director Liu, loomingly, a very attractive-smelling man. But what did that matter now? The monster stared blankly in the direction Guanin had run. "What Director Liu?" it muttered, stepping away. "I don't know any Director Liu. Figure it out yourselves." The creature hurried down the plush carpet of the business-class cabin, its uniformed back looking unnervingly stiff. The guards and the police officers traded looks, their faces turning pale. "Didn't the chief just walk out a minute ago?" one guard whispered. He told us Director Liu was arriving. The realization hit the colleague like a physical blow. Sweat broke out on his forehead. Damn it, Zhu Yan. Just a minute ago, Guanin had been so sure I had no reason to leave the train. Now, the irony was sickening. Guanin, come back, the colleague screamed, sprinting after him. On the other side of the station, my legs were failing. I could barely lift them. Sweat soaked my shirt, and my ribs felt like they were being pierced by hot needles with every breath. My lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. I was pale, gasping for air that wouldn't come. But the finish line was there. 50 meters. I gritted my teeth. I hadn't entered this nightmare just to die on the floor of a train station. I held my breath, forced my muscles to fire one last time, and accelerated. In the monitoring room, Guanin was frantically scrolling through the footage. The more he saw, the colder his blood ran. The footage was untouched. I hadn't deleted a single frame. The failure was entirely his. He had underestimated a high school kid with no social experience. At 4 a.m., I had gone to carriage 15 to talk to Zhongli. 50 minutes later, a new Zhongli had stood boldly at the entrance of carriage 7, waiting for them. I had manipulated the monster right under his nose. And then, I had transformed into the chief and walked right out the front door. F*******. Guanin screamed. The hair on his neck stood up. My reaction speed was insane. But the announcement hadn't played yet. That meant I hadn't reached the exit. He still had a chance to win. He still had a chance to live. He didn't have time to think. He spun around, nearly colliding with the drooling monster as it lunged for him. Guanin dodged, not even bothering to use his powers, and shoved past his colleagues to leap off the train. Guanin, he lied about Director Liu. Wait for us, his partner yelled. Guanin didn't look back. He took the stairs 3 at a time. Behind him, the voices of his team faded into the distance. Holy crap, he's fast, the colleague cursed. He turned to the remaining officers. Half of you stay here. The rest, follow me with the dogs. He turned back toward the monitoring room where the chief was standing up. Chief, we need to. The words died in his throat. The man he thought was his leader was changing. The monster's mouth tore open, far beyond human limits, splitting its skull down the middle. Rows of jagged, needle-like teeth dripping with foul saliva were revealed. The monster was starving. The muscles around its eyes contracted, crushing those dead, watery pits of blackness. Food, it hissed. I need food. The monster didn't care that my colleague wasn't a player. The man's heart skipped a beat, his eyes widening in pure terror as the passengers around us began to scream. Chaos erupted instantly. People scrambled in every direction, tripping over each other to escape the nightmare. In that split second of hesitation, the monster lunged. It sank its teeth deep into my colleague's neck. Blood sprayed everywhere like a gruesome firework. I didn't stay to watch. I couldn't hear the screams behind me anymore. I was running for my life through the underground passage. It wasn't a long tunnel, but I gave it everything I had. I cleared the ticket gates in seconds and burst into the waiting hall. The hall was eerily silent. The equipment hummed normally, and the old, colorful billboards flickered with artificial cheer. But the place was a ghost town. The only other soul, there was a figure sprinting toward the exit with everything he had. Lin Yuan. I warred. I pushed my body into a desperate, suicidal sprint. From my perspective, Lin Yuan was so close to the exit. 1 step, maybe 2, definitely no more than 5. 20 meters. That was all that separated us. Lin Yuan heard my scream. He knew it was me, but he didn't look back. If we were running the same distance, there was no way I could have caught up so fast. His theory was right. The damn carnival world had rigged the game, artificially stretching the distance he had to run. He gritted his teeth and accelerated again. I could practically hear his heart hammering against his ribs. If he hadn't played those mind games, or if he had just tried to use his powers to bully his way out earlier, the police would have caught him instantly. He would have been dead long ago. 10 meters. 5 meters. My footsteps were right behind him. To me, it looked like he was moving in slow motion, almost frozen. I reached out, my fingers inches away from grabbing the back of his jacket. But at the final moment, I failed. Lin Yuan lunged through the last 2 meters and stepped into the pale morning sunlight. He spun around, hunched over with his hands on his knees, gasping for air. He stared back at me as if we were separated by an invisible barrier. From his side, everything behind me was pitch black. There was no station, no crowd, just darkness. Sweat poured down his face. He lifted his head, his eyes sharp and full of disdain. Then he smiled at me. I tried to reach out and touch him, but my fingers hit a solid wall. It felt like thick glass. We were only 10 centimeters apart, and I could hear him perfectly, but I couldn't cross over. Despair washed over me. I had failed the mission. Was I going to die? Lin Yuan was still smiling. Nice job, buddy, he panted, his voice ragged. You owe me your life. I frowned, not understanding what he meant. But a second later, that smooth female voice exploded in my head, announcing the final results. The game of cat and mouse has ended. Congratulations, Guan En. You have successfully completed the task and cleared the newbie instance. What? Cleared? I survived? I looked at Lin Yuan in shock, but the world around me shifted instantly. I wasn't in the station anymore. I was back inside Carriage 7 of Train G3075. At the same time, Lin Yuan heard the announcement too. A feeling of immense relief washed over him. It felt like warm water rising past his legs, soothing his aching muscles and exhausted organs. The pain vanished. He felt a genuine, deep sense of joy. Congratulations, user has been deleted, the voice said. Damn it, Lin Yuan muttered. He really regretted that nickname now. Even after winning, that name gave him a jolt. You used ingenious methods to complete your task and carry your companion to victory. You have successfully cleared the cat and mouse instance. You have returned to the real world. Rewards will be issued in 10 minutes. The carnival looks forward to your next visit. In the blink of an eye, the scene changed for Lin Yuan. The darkness and Guanin were gone. He was standing in a busy station in the early morning light. People were bustling past him. He straightened his back slowly. A middle-aged woman hurried past, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. She stopped, looked down, and glanced back at him. You dropped your bag, young man, she said. Lin Yuan felt like he had been gone for a lifetime. He looked down. A black backpack lay quietly at his feet, the same one he had left on the train during his escape. The red glow from a nearby billboard reflected off the fabric. He picked it up, slung it over his shoulder, and took in the world. The smell of breakfast stalls filled the air. The mundane, busy sounds of reality were everywhere. He stretched his muscles and walked into the sunlight. The morning sun wasn't harsh. It felt like a warm, comforting tide. He let himself enjoy it for a moment, but he knew he couldn't stay. He was still a wanted man. As he walked, he thought about the voice. This instance was different from his first one. In his own newbie instance, there were only players and monsters. But this time, there were so many non-players involved. Did the carnival drag innocent people in, or were they just hyper-realistic NPCs? He walked faster, trying to soak up the warmth. What kind of place was the carnival, really? Meanwhile, back on the train, the voice spoke in my head again. Your companion was very impressive. He carried you to victory single-handedly. I heard her, but the joy of survival was drowned out by the horror in front of me. My colleague lay on the floor. His head and half of his torso were simply gone. Dark red blood soaked the carpet. His body looked like a mangled anatomy model. The monster was nowhere to be found. The other passengers had been evacuated, but the dozen officers on duty remained. They stood in a circle, battered and bruised, looking at me with grim expressions. One of them stepped forward, his face pale. Guan En, what happened? What happened to the chief? We all saw it. I bit my lip until it turned white. I had made so many mistakes this morning. The carnage in front of me revealed a bloody reality. I had misunderstood the roles of cat and mouse from the very beginning. My companion didn't mean my police colleagues. It meant my fellow player. Lin Yuan, the man I thought was a devious criminal, had seen through the game from the start. He was right. If it wasn't for him, I'd be dead. But my colleague was innocent. He wasn't even a player. Because I had bungled the mission and failed to use my powers to stop the monster, he was dead. My mind raced. What had happened to Lin Yuan last night? Who was he? Was all of this because of him? As my colleagues pressed me for answers, the female voice spoke one last time. You have returned to the real world. Rewards will be issued in 10 minutes. The carnival looks forward to your next visit. In past games, only players died. I hoped my colleague would be the exception. I hoped he'd be standing there, confused but alive. My heart hung in my throat, waiting for a miracle, only to drop like a stone a second later. Outside the train window, the morning light was just beginning to break. Passengers appeared on the platform, waiting to board as if nothing had happened. But inside the carriage, the nightmare remained. My colleague didn't get a second chance. He didn't respawn. He lay there exactly as he had fallen, a mangled heap on the floor. The sight of his remains sent the passengers outside into fits of screaming terror. "I'm sorry," the woman's voice said, sounding surprisingly human. "We are merciful, but only to the players of the carnival." I didn't know any of that yet. I was miles away, my legs burning from a long, frantic run. I was exhausted and starving. Even though the adrenaline from surviving 2 lethal games in 24 hours hadn't fully faded, I forced myself to stop. I bought a steaming pancake and a bag of soy milk from a street vendor. I had to eat. I had to keep my strength up. Manhwa City was massive. I pulled out my phone and started searching, eventually locking onto an old district. The map showed it was slated for demolition. It was perfect: old buildings, crumbling infrastructure, and plenty of blind spots for surveillance cameras. I didn't know what was happening on train G3075. I didn't know if the monster, Wei Ren, was currently eating someone. I couldn't afford to gamble. If I could reach the old district before the police realized what I'd done, I might actually have a chance to prepare. I stood up and scanned the area for cameras. I knew exactly where they were positioned. I moved toward the exit, keeping my head down, and ducked into a corner near some stairs where an old man was resting. When I walked back out, I wasn't Lin Yuan anymore. I was hunched over, shuffling with the heavy, slow gait of an elderly man. I flagged down a taxi and climbed in. As the train station faded into the distance, I gripped the edge of my coat, my knuckles white. 5 minutes later, the voice returned. I stared out the window at the streets bathed in morning light, focusing every ounce of my attention. I prayed for something useful. "Congratulations once again," the voice chirped. "The user has logged out. I'm tired of praising you, so let's get straight to the point. The results of the cat and mouse game are as follows. 2 players entered, 2 players survived. 1 civilian casualty. During the police evacuation, several people were driven into a non-real space, resulting in multiple disappearances. My mind stalled. 1 dead, multiple missing. I remembered the image of the monster disappearing into that pitch-black hallway. The police must have cleared the area before the carnival teleported the platform back to reality. Those people didn't go home. They were swallowed by the game. And that 1 death? The monster hadn't gotten Guan in, so it must have snatched a bystander. I thought of my brother's horrific end, and my face twisted in a grimace. "You ranked first with the highest score," she continued. "Your basic rewards are 10 rest days. These stack with your previous days for a total of 20. You may choose to enter a game early, but, well, that's not important. You'd probably just get caught by the police anyway. 20 days. It didn't matter. If I stayed still, the law would find me. Your cash prize is 40,000 yuan. That was better. It was enough. I could exchange some of it at the Hall of Mourning and keep the rest for tuition and living expenses. Assuming, of course, I ever got to go back to school. Additionally, considering your current predicament in the real world, we are issuing a special item." My eyes lit up. A strange, addictive surge of pleasure washed over me. I sat up straighter. Anything was better than nothing. "Congratulations. You have obtained a one-time use item, hidden and unsent. Please be patient and listen to the instructions." I leaned in, my ears practically ringing. This item allows you to completely hide 2 key pieces of information regarding a specific event. It will then create a larger distraction to divert public attention, ensuring the matter you care about will not be investigated for a short period. She paused for effect. It was the perfect tool. The item can monitor specific events, but the user must manually input the key information they wish to delete. Once confirmed, it cannot be changed. This was new. I'd never seen anything like it. If I chose the right information to wipe, the impact would be massive. I looked at the morning traffic, my brow finally unfurrowing. The maximum delay is 2 years. The exact duration depends on what you input and your own subsequent efforts. 2 years. I couldn't help but smirk. Even if I only got 6 months, it would be enough. The reality I knew was already being eroded by the carnival. By the time the police finished dealing with the supernatural chaos breaking out across the city, they wouldn't have the energy to care about my old baggage. The item has been sent to your phone. Use it within 2 days. I reached for my pocket, but she stopped me. Don't be in such a hurry. I still have the rest of your rewards. Player level 2. This means you can tank skill attacks from 75% of other players. It seems most beta testers only have level 2 abilities. Talent is a fixed thing, after all. She moved on to my specific skills. Acting, level 5. It takes 3 games to move from level 5 to level 6. Not bad for a rookie. Complaining, level 4. Your aunt couldn't have come up with those insults on her own. Bullying, level 2. Keep working on it. Bullying was the only skill I hadn't used, and it was the only one that hadn't leveled up. It was clear now. If I wanted to get stronger, I had to use these powers ruthlessly. Rewards complete. Good luck, player. See you next time. The voice vanished. Silence returned to the taxi. We were still 30 minutes from my destination. I pulled out my phone immediately. Below the clock on my home screen, a new app had appeared. It was a striking icon, a gold background featuring an intricate black illustration of a bird trapped in a cage. Every feather looked real. It was far more detailed than any normal app. Underneath it were 3 words in blood red: hidden and unsent. I took a breath and tapped the icon. The screen on my phone turned a pale, sickly yellow. In the dead center, that black bird trapped in the cage began to flap its wings, one rhythmic beat at a time. I stared at the icon, wondering if this was just a loading screen. After a few seconds, the bird froze. Bold lines of text began to jump across the display. Congratulations, lucky player. Monitoring complete. We have confirmed that you are currently in a state of imprisonment. Details are as follows. So, it was scanning my life. Interesting. I felt that familiar spark of curiosity as my eyes raced down the screen to read the full incident report. Incident: illegal escape. You intentionally hid your player status. You defied the will of the authorities. You left the eroded city. This has caused the police department to launch a cross-regional manhunt. I stared at the glowing red words, reading them over and over. It confirmed my theory. The items from the carnival used the same terminology as the game itself. The descent of the carnival was called erosion. I wondered what the real world would look like once that erosion was complete. The app continued to list the reasons for my pursuit. The police believed my escape might spread the erosion to other cities, bringing a survival crisis to the rest of humanity. I leaned my head against the taxi window, letting the warmth of the sun seep into my scalp. I couldn't really blame them. If the police viewed those mysterious sudden deaths as part of a spreading plague, their concern was justified. Suddenly, a line of text appeared with a dramatic, almost Shakespearean flair. Oh, the injustice. Your name is Lin Yuan. I glanced at the driver to make sure he wasn't looking, then whispered under my breath. How is that me? My name is user logged out. The app wiped that line away instantly, replacing it with new data. Monitoring updated. A larger event has occurred in your vicinity, with enough influence to overshadow your illegal escape. Incident: death of an officer. During the cat and mouse instance, half of a non-player officer was consumed. The carnival does not provide resurrection for non-players. It certainly won't offer the dignity of a whole corpse. The red text stung my eyes. A cold chill exploded at the top of my head. When the girl's voice had made the announcement earlier, I assumed the officer would die a quiet, natural death like everyone else. But if he returned to the train as only half a body, and if the public saw that, things would be different. Even if the authorities covered it up, the internal shock within the police department would be massive. The app told me this event had already caused a small-scale tremor. Its impact far exceeded my little escape. It was the perfect smokescreen. Friendly reminder: these two events are not entirely unrelated. They are intertwined and complex. There is a high probability of a chain reaction. The player must carefully consider which information needs to be hidden. Move quickly. Do not give up. I sat up straight, leaning closer to the screen. Do not give up? I had no intention of giving up. The app explained that the information hiding range included digital data and the blurring of human memories. A black box appeared on the screen, a cursor blinking inside it. The keyboard popped up. I looked out the window, deep in thought. The taxi was stuck in traffic on an overpass. From here, I could see the hazy old district in the distance. Weathered buildings piled on top of each other, connected by narrow corridors. They were just like these two incidents, tangled together. If the police investigated the officer's death, they would trace it back to why his partner, Guan was on a business trip in the first place. And the reason for that trip was to catch me. I couldn't sever the link between the two events entirely. The only thing I could do was hide myself within the chaos. I turned back to the phone and carefully typed 2 lines. Hide Lin Yuan's name. Hide Lin Yuan's face. Without my name or my face, the police couldn't lock onto me. According to the item description, the memories of everyone involved would be modified. I would become a ghost in the system. Even if they tracked down my aunt, they wouldn't find a trace of me. Since the item only hid information related to the incident, my other actions wouldn't be affected. I could go to school and enter new instances to gather information without living like a fugitive. I checked everything one last time and hit confirm. In an instant, a surge of secret pleasure washed over me. A faint, electric tingle buzzed through every nerve in my brain. I felt a level of joy I'd never known before, as if I were merging with a great power. The feeling was so intense it actually scared me back to my senses. I pinched the web of my thumb hard, forcing myself to focus on reality. Meanwhile, back at the train station, Guan was drenched in cold sweat. The passengers were gone, replaced by police cordons and grim-faced officers. The body, or what was left of it, had been taken away. They had searched the entire train and couldn't find the head. Inside carriage 6, a high-ranking officer put down his phone and looked at Guan with a mix of pity and sternness. I just received an important notice, the officer said. Based on the current research, you should know this. Your superior's body has been found. Guan nodded, his voice hollow. I know. I've known since this morning. A voice told me I couldn't speak. If I had reacted, I would have died within 10 minutes. The officer sighed. That matches our data. This is a major incident. You need to stay in Anwu City to cooperate with the investigation. We came here to catch someone, didn't we? What was his name? Guan frowned. He tried to speak the name. He remembered it being very unique, something that should have been etched into his mind. But as he opened his mouth, his mind went blank. I can't remember, sir, Guan whispered, shaking his head. It's in the system. We can check when we get back. Right, the officer grunted. I've notified the others to find him as soon as possible. Whoever this person is, he isn't simple. Get some rest. We'll need a detailed report later. On my phone screen, the bird in the cage appeared one last time. I watched its wings flap until the final message appeared. Confirmed, player. The effect is now active. If managed correctly, this will last for 2 years. I let out a long, shaky breath. It worked. However, the text continued. Your choice will trigger even greater panic. Be prepared. Remember, act decisively. Endure to the end. The black icon shattered like a firework, disappearing into the yellow background. I was a ghost now. And the game was just beginning. The colorful light on my phone screen faded away, and I let out a long, heavy breath. My boss had been replaced by a weirdo. That meant the real man died sometime during the night. No matter how Guan traveled to Anwu City, it was clear that the Carnival Paradise game was spreading. It had hit another location while I was busy escaping the city. The timing was too perfect. Once they found the real boss's body, the blame for the outbreak and my unauthorized escape would fall squarely on me. There was no turning back now. I couldn't let the police catch me. As for the greater panic the game warned me about, I'd just have to deal with that when it arrived. The taxi crawled off the highway and meandered through side streets before dropping me off near an old bus station. I stayed in the shadows, heading toward a guest house tucked away in a dilapidated tenement building. There was no front desk. I booked the room online and received a door code. It was perfect for avoiding people. More importantly, there were plenty of blind spots in the local surveillance, making it easy for me to shift back to my original face. 20 minutes later, I collapsed onto the sofa inside the room. My brain felt like it was melting. Now that the immediate crisis was managed, the exhaustion finally hit me. I forced myself to take a hot shower, then tumbled onto the soft bed, still feeling the warmth of the hairdryer on my skin. My muscles relaxed, and I drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep. While I slept, the police station was in a state of quiet chaos. A young officer clicked his mouse repeatedly, staring at the screen in disbelief. "This isn't right, sir," he muttered. He could find the records for Guanan's business trip, but the file for the suspect was wrong. Where a name and photo should have been, there was only a series of blank boxes and a solid white image. "Try refreshing it," a senior officer said, leaning over his shoulder. "A file like this wouldn't pass the audit. It's impossible." The younger man refreshed the page 5 times. The blanks remained, stubborn and mocking. "It's weird, sir. The system shouldn't have a bug like this." The senior officer frowned. "I remember looking at this file earlier. The guy's name and face were very unique. I thought I'd never forget them. His name was, He trailed off. The memory was there, locked in a box inside his mind, but the key was gone. He knew it was important, but the details had vanished. He shook it off, refusing to be rattled. "Call the relatives," he ordered. "We have the aunt's ID and the suspect's ID number in the system. Check the household registry and verify the identity that way." 10 minutes later, the young officer hung up the phone. His brow was furrowed tight. "Sir, they can't find him. He's not in the registry." "And?" the senior officer asked, sensing something was very wrong. "And the ID number in our file, they say it's wrong. They entered it 5 times. The system says the person doesn't exist." The senior officer's heart sank. If the ID didn't match the registry, the man was a ghost. "I'll call the informant to double-check," the young officer said. "Maybe there was a typo when they uploaded the data." The call went through. A woman's shrill, hysterical voice pierced the room, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, thank God. Did you find that little brat? He can't run forever. He deserves to die. Officer, you have to make him pay for my son. I'll haunt him if you don't." The officer stayed patient. "Ma'am, do you remember his name? Do you have his ID number?" "His name? It's... The aunt paused. She searched her mind, but it was as empty as her bank account. I can't remember. Wait, let me check the family register." The 2 officers exchanged a look. Guanan had forgotten. Now the aunt had forgotten. 5 minutes later, the woman's screams turned into pure terror. "Officer, his name and photo are gone. They're gone from the register. It's impossible. Did you people do something to the book? I still have his ID card number written down, though. That has to work, right?" The young officer stared at his screen. He had the ID number right in front of him. "Go ahead, read it to me." The aunt read the digits one by one. They matched the screen perfectly. Every single number was identical. "Are you sure?" the officer asked. "I'm sure. I'm looking right at it." The senior officer signaled for him to put the call on speaker. "Ma'am, do you have a contact number? A phone number, a social media account?" She rattled off a series of digits. The officer thanked her and hung up. He personally typed the numbers into the search database. Empty. The ID number belonged to no one. The phone number was unassigned. It was as if the man's entire existence had been wiped from the fabric of reality. "Report this to the top immediately," the senior officer commanded, his voice cold. "This is a major incident." The young officer stood up quickly. "Sir, why? What's happening?" The senior officer wiped cold sweat from his forehead. "I've seen cases like this in the secret files. It sounds insane, but the man we're looking for might have the power to erase himself. Or worse, he might be working with the things we're trying to stop. He might even be one of them." He rushed out of the room, the younger officer trailing behind. "I'm going to find Guanan. We need to know exactly who we're dealing with." I woke up 10 hours later. The sun was down, and it was 7 in the evening. The old district was coming to life. I opened the window and watched the glow of milk tea shops and barbecue stalls. The sound of sizzling pans and the smell of hot food wafted up to my room. I was starving. My appetite had finally returned. I walked downstairs, wearing my original face. I found a small, decent-looking shop and ordered a bowl of beef fried rice and a hot soup. The police hadn't moved yet. Their silence was my shield, helping me vanish into the night. In a situation like this, using my real face was actually the safest move. I sat in a small shop, devouring a massive plate of fragrant fried rice. Between bites, I stared at my palm for 3 seconds. The player center flickered to life. 4 familiar colored blocks appeared. Personal info, player forum, horror map, and online mall. The announcement from the end of the newbie instance echoed in my head. The voice had said that horror currency and human currency could be exchanged, though the rate wasn't great yet. To do anything, I had to follow the map to the nearest hall of mourning. I stared at the horror map for 3 seconds to open it. Just then, the shop owner slid a bowl of steaming mushroom soup onto my table. "Enjoy your meal," he said. I muttered a quick thanks, my mind completely occupied. The map interface was staggering. It wasn't just a flat image. It was 2 parallel layers, floating in the air like 3D models. The top layer was the reality I knew: streets, buildings, and streetlights. A black caged bird icon showed my current location. Above this layer, red text floated: "Uncorrupted world, peaceful." I noticed thin red lines tethering certain buildings on the top layer to structures on the bottom layer. The bottom layer was a nightmare. It was a dense, swarming mass of dwellings that looked like melting candles. Some buildings had strange horns or tentacles, pulsing as if they were alive. The red lines were slowly pulling the nightmare buildings upward, uprooting them from their world. I felt a chill. The lines meant a forced connection. Was the world eventually going to merge? Was my reality going to become as grotesque as that horror land? I had a dark thought about the legend of the red thread of fate, but this was a hellish version of it. The smell of fried beef helped ground me, pulling me back from the terror of the vision. I scanned the top layer again. A massive building shaped like a human skull caught my eye. The top of the head was unnaturally sharp, and long black hair floated eerily around it. Its eyes, lips, and teeth looked like liquefied metal melting in a furnace. It looked like a man frozen in a silent cry. The words "Hall of Mourning" floated in blood-red letters right in the center of the skull. The map showed the hall was currently intersecting with the bottom of a building in my world. I took a sip of the mushroom soup and focused on the intersection point. The map zoomed in, showing the interior layout in perfect detail. Could I use this to cheat in maze-like instances? As if reading my mind, red text appeared. Area currently has no active instance. Displaying original layout. Fine, no cheating then. The text shifted into new directions. Manhwa Street, Wanxiang Plaza, B1, Way Cafe. Today's password: silence is the way home. A password? I was curious. Who would I be saying this to? Was there a horror entity living in an ordinary cafe? A warning popped up. Mall closes at 10:30 p.m. Hall of Mourning does not provide lodging. Please watch your time. I finished the last bite of my rice and checked my phone. It was 7:50 p.m. A taxi to Wanxiang Plaza would take about 30 minutes. If things went smoothly, I'd be inside by 8:30. 2 hours should be enough. I didn't hesitate. I stepped out and hailed a cab. Meanwhile, the local police station was lit up like a Christmas tree. Guan-in sat among a team of experts, his back damp with cold sweat. On the screen before them was footage from train G3075 and every other camera that had captured me, including the time I picked up that envelope. The strange thing was, I wasn't there anymore. In every single video, the clear figure Guan-in remembered had been replaced by a blurry black shadow. You couldn't see my face, my height, or even my clothes. The shadow was so faint it almost dissolved into the background. A senior officer stood up, his face grim. "Based on fingerprints and biological evidence from the train, we can confirm this is a real person, not a horror entity," he said, holding up a sealed bag containing a single hair and a fingerprint sample. Whatever his goal, he brought something unknown and dangerous into our city. Guan-in remembered the words I'd whispered to him. "Your life was a gift from me." He felt like the official narrative was wrong, but as a junior officer, he couldn't speak up. He just listened as the officer continued. "We suspect the penalty in Guan-in's newbie instance was triggered by this man's escape, leading to today's tragedy," the officer declared. "Death from these unknown forces will only increase. We must catch this man before he destabilizes everything. He has placed his own desires above the safety of the city." Outside, my taxi sped past the station. The chatty driver glanced at the glowing office building and looked at me in the rearview mirror. "The police are busy tonight," he said. "That mess this morning really shook them up." My internal alarm bells went off. I sharpened my focus, but kept my voice casual. What happened? The driver looked shocked. Man, you haven't heard? Someone died on the high-speed rail at the North Station today. Tons of cops. People even filmed it. So, in the 10 hours I was asleep, the situation had exploded. I stayed quiet, letting him ramble. I've still got the video on my phone, he continued. That cop died bad. Head was just gone. My cousin's a government worker, and he says they've formed a special task force. The whole city is under watch. You can't even get out easily. I gave a bitter smile and lied. I really had no idea. The driver's gossip gave me exactly what I needed to know. The walls were closing in. Whatever I had to do, I needed to be careful. I needed to keep a close eye on the situation. Clearing my name and face from the official records made me harder to track, but it wasn't a perfect shield. They still had my fingerprints, hair samples, ID number, and home address. I was just a college student who spent my days sleeping. If the hidden app was right and the police viewed this as a deadly contagion, they wouldn't hesitate to use every biological scrap I'd left behind to hunt me down. You look like a student, the driver said, glancing at me again in the mirror. You're from out of town, right? That's rough. There's a full traffic control order now. Everyone is stuck where they are. No one gets out of the city. He told me people were losing their minds over it. I pulled out my phone and checked the trending topics. Nothing. I found a few stray posts complaining about the lockdown, but when I clicked them, they vanished. Error 404. The authorities were scrubbing the internet clean. If a citywide lockdown wasn't trending, it meant the government was intentionally suppressing the news. It shouldn't last long, right? I asked casually. I mean, it's a whole city. The taxi pulled up to a massive, gleaming shopping mall. The windows on the first floor were wide, clean, and modern. Who knows? The driver muttered. But don't expect to leave for at least 5 days. Take care. I stepped out, and as the door closed, I caught him whispering to himself. How can a guy be that handsome and have such a generic face? I've been looking at him the whole way, and I can't remember what he looks like at all. I pushed through the mall doors. The warm, bright lights were almost blinding. I followed the escalator down. The place was brand new, with high ceilings and an expensive layout. Looking down at the basement level, I saw trendy milk tea shops and dessert stalls, the kind of places I usually couldn't afford. If it wasn't for the map in my head, I never would have guessed this was where the Hall of Mourning was hidden. I wondered if that cop, Guan, had ever checked his map. If he had, the police would have swarmed this place by now. The girl from earlier had told me to keep moving. Since she hadn't sent a new warning, it meant the police hadn't found it yet. This was the perfect time to exchange my currency. I wove through the corridors until I reached a shop in the center of the basement. It was a dark brown, twisted cylinder that stretched all the way to the ceiling. It looked like the gnarled root of a massive tree that had been hacked off. It sat there like a dark island in a sea of pale mall tiles. A giant sign hung crookedly on the trunk, glowing with a faint, blood-red light. My pulse quickened. I walked closer, my body tensing with nerves. What would I find inside? The shop had 2 dark glass windows, but the interior was dim, lit only by flickering candlelight. I circled the structure until I found the main entrance. A pretty girl in a brown skirt suit stood by the door. When she saw me, she flashed a stiff, robotic smile. Her voice was a strained imitation of a human. Hello, lovely gentleman. Would you like to come in for a cup of coffee? She was a weirdo. Based on what the monster on the train said, she had a human skin, which meant she had survived at least one instance. She stared at me, her eyes burning with a terrifying, raw hunger. I felt a wave of nausea. I wondered if the humans who walked into this cafe ever walked back out. I kept my face neutral and spoke the passcode. Silence is the way home. The girl's expression shifted instantly. Her mouth twitched with disappointment. She turned and pushed the door open. Welcome. Once the door clicked shut, she didn't bother hiding her voice anymore. Follow me, player. The shop smelled like heavy, damp rust. There wasn't a single customer. A massive, crude chandelier hung from the ceiling, topped with dozens of real wax candles dripping onto the floor. I was pretty sure this was a massive fire hazard. Have any other players been here today? I asked. She gave me a dejected look. No, you're the first customer. Honestly, I don't know why we have such a great location and no food. It's probably because the place smells like an unclean murder scene, I thought. But at least it meant the police hadn't arrived. I followed her behind the counter. She reached into a hidden compartment and pressed something. Only I can open this, she grumbled. Though, I won't be able to much longer. The floor beneath us shuddered and began to rotate downward like a lift. Why not? I asked, trying to keep my balance. Because I'm starving to death, she said, her hollow eyes fixed on my face. Regulations say I can't eat you right now. I hate you, player. She stared at me with such focus that I felt like a steak on a plate. My stomach churned. I had a weirdo form I could have used to enter, but I needed to set up a player account for the online mall. I had to endure being her forbidden snack for now. As the platform sank deeper, the true hall of mourning revealed itself. It was massive. The scale of the place hit me like a physical blow. It was grand, terrifying, and ancient. Suddenly, a surge of power washed over me. It started as a freezing chill in my chest that spread to my limbs, making me stumble. But right behind the cold came a wave of intense, overwhelming joy. I couldn't help it. I started to grin. The two sensations twisted together into a feeling of absolute satisfaction. I'm getting addicted to this, the thought flashed in my mind. That thought acted like a bucket of ice water. The feeling vanished instantly. I gripped my palms tight, digging my nails in to stay grounded. We were at the very top edge of the hall. A chandelier the size of a two-story house hung from the black dome above, lit by thousands of white candles. Their light was far stronger than the ones in the cafe. Red crystals dangled from the frame, looking like a cascading waterfall of blood. The hall was split into 3 massive levels, but the total height felt like a 10-story building. The upper levels were lined with dark, thorny railings. Behind those railings, I could see shadows shifting, strange, grotesque creatures looking down. From this height, the things moving at the very bottom looked like tiny ants. Wow, I whispered. It was the only word I had left. The elevated walkways connecting the levels caught my eye, stretching across the open air like spiderwebs. I couldn't stop staring. Just look all you want, Chunwei spat, his voice laced with irritation. You don't have the status to set foot on the 2nd or 3rd floors anyway. He looked absolutely famished, his hunger making him even more bitter than usual. He explained that the 3rd floor housed the Abyss Child Club. It was an exclusive haunt, reserved only for the wealthiest and most powerful supernatural entities. As our platform drifted past the 3rd floor, I saw a woman standing on one of the walkways. She wore a magnificent, deep crimson gown that flowed around her. But as I looked closer, I felt a jolt of horror. Her skin was a sickly, bruised green, and her entire body was a mass of rotting, festering sores. I tried to study her details, but a sharp, stabbing pain shot through my eyes. My head spun, and the world tilted dangerously. Trash player, Chunwei mocked, rubbing his empty stomach. Had enough? That's the price for staring at a high-level horror entity when you're nothing. I dropped to a crouch to keep from falling off the edge. There were no railings on this platform. My vision slowly began to clear, but my heart was still racing. Who was that? I asked, breathless. She was dressed like some 18th-century noblewoman with a terminal case of syphilis. No idea, Chunwei muttered. My memory is limited. The platform finally touched down at the very bottom. Another version of Chunwei, this one wearing a man's skin, was already waiting for us. He signaled for me to follow. As I stepped onto the smooth black floor, the platform began its steady ascent back up into the darkness. Hello, player, the new Chunwei said stiffly. You're here for currency exchange? You'll need to open a personal account and bind it to the mall's payment system. I nodded. It was exactly what I expected. We offer several account tiers, he continued, leading me toward a massive counter. The counter was incredibly tall, shielded by a thin layer of transparent glass. Behind it, dozens of exquisite, life-size dolls were working in perfect unison. I watched one of them counting gold coins about the size of a palm. The minimum to open an account is 500 ghost coins, Chunwei explained in a flat tone. That's 50,000 yuan. I did the math quickly. That was exactly the reward from my first instance. The few thousand I made from the second one would have to cover my living expenses. 5,000 ghost coins makes you a C-class VIP, he went on. That was 500,000 yuan. 50,000 ghost coins for B-class. The jump was massive. 5 million yuan just for B-class? And 100,000 ghost coins for A-class, he said. That's 10 million yuan at the current rate. I won't bother describing the tiers above that. No player has that kind of money yet. Do the benefits change with the rank? I asked. Of course. A C-class VIP gets a rental slot on Birdcage Street. Everything else stays the same. 500,000 yuan just for the right to rent a place. I frowned. What's Birdcage Street? How is it different from anywhere else? I hadn't seen it on any maps. Between the Longzhong King and Longzhong Bird titles I'd heard about, I wondered if this was some kind of player ghetto. Don't be in a hurry, Chun Wei said robotically. Birdcage Street won't manifest for another 5 or 6 months. When it does, it will be one of the few districts where no instances occur and no horror entities hunt for food. I knew it. It was a sanctuary for players, likely the lowest tier one available. I glanced at Chun Wei and noticed a sudden, predatory hunger flare in his eyes. Sometimes, certain instances reward these erosion-free houses, he added. But the chances are rare. I burned that information into my memory. In the future, safe housing would be the ultimate resource. But I didn't trust this joyful paradise for a second. Would renting a room on Birdcage Street really be enough to survive? What about B-class? I asked politely. B-class requires 5 million yuan. That gives you both rental and permanent residency rights on Birdcage Street. If you reach A-class, you can enter the Golden Dragon District. You get rental and residency rights there instead. 10 million yuan just for a residency permit. I let out a whistle, acting like a shocked commoner. We also throw in the Birdcage Street rights for free at that level, he added. I hummed to myself. Birdcage Street and Golden Dragon District. The names made it sound like we were just moving from one cage to a slightly nicer one. Being a player in this world felt like a dead end. One more thing, Chun Wei said. All VIP accounts require a minimum balance. If your assets drop below the threshold, you'll be downgraded. I cursed under my breath. So I'd have to leave 10 million yuan sitting in an account, untouched, and still pay for the house on top of that? It was a nightmare. I stayed quiet, deciding I'd try to squeeze more info out of someone else later when I had a different identity. We reached a window where a beautiful doll sat waiting. Chun Wei smiled at her. New player account, he said. Player, do you want a VIP or a standard account? You can always upgrade later. Standard, I said immediately. I had about 90,000 yuan. 50,000 was doable, but 500,000? Even if I sold myself, I couldn't come up with that. Unless the police department was willing to pay me a massive bounty for my own head, I was sticking to the basics. The doll stared at me with glass-bead eyes. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Very well, player, she said in a chilling, mechanical voice. Extend your left hand. Present your player mark. She rattled off a long list of terms and conditions at high speed. I strained to hear every word. We will issue both a physical card and an online account. If the card is lost, you must bring your left hand to the Hall of Mourning to report the loss and get a replacement. If the left hand is lost, there is no recourse. Once activated, you can check your balance in the personal settings of the game interface. There is no minimum balance requirement for standard accounts. Perfect. No risk of losing the account if I spent my last cent. Once the online account is active, she continued, you can choose to receive future rewards directly in ghost coins or in your original currency. That was a relief. It meant I wouldn't have to keep sneaking into the Hall of Mourning. Once the police figured out what was happening, they'd likely surround the Wanxiang Plaza with plainclothes officers. Understood, I said. I held out my left hand. The giant doll leaned down, her cold, glassy eyes focusing on the tattoo-like mark on my skin. While I was busy opening my account, the police briefing was still dragging on. The lead officer looked grim as he addressed the room. We are watching closely, he told his colleagues. Based on our encounters, the suspect has extremely high counter-reconnaissance skills and a powerful psychological edge. He is meticulous. We cannot afford to spook him. This is why I didn't authorize a mass text or a door-to-door census. We can't let him know we're coming. Guanin sat in the back, listening intently, a thin layer of sweat forming on his forehead. The net was closing in. We had locked onto a few potential target areas. The search was narrowing down to the residential zones around the North Railway Station and several urban villages. According to Guanin's confession, the suspect was about 18 years old, a freshman at Xishan University. The officer on stage paused, his expression grim. He began delegating the next phase of the mission. Tonight, a specific team would stay behind to scour the surveillance footage from the station and conduct deeper sweeps of the flagged neighborhoods. We were highly suspicious of one thing. The ID number we had was likely correct, even if the system couldn't find a matching name. If my aunt and the authorities from the other city provided the same number, it was practically a fact. The officer picked up a small device from the desk. He explained that once they narrowed the area down, plainclothes officers would go door to door. They'd use excuses like checking water meters or doing anti-fraud outreach to inspect physical IDs and household registers. It was a clumsy, brute force method. The officer knew it, and I could feel his frustration. If I hadn't become such a massive threat, a trick like hiding my name and face might have actually worked. But this situation was too big to ignore. "Guan in," the officer said, turning to my cousin. "You're a player. You're going into isolation at a designated spot in the suburbs. No contact with anyone. You'll have supplies and a phone. If you hear any broadcast announcements, contact us immediately." Guan in nodded, acting like a loyal soldier. The officer then turned back to the map, preparing to lead a team straight to the Hall of Mourning. Inside that very hall, I stood up from a soft leather chair. In my hand was a golden card. In the center sat a finely carved bird in a cage, but as I looked closer, the bird actually fluttered its wings. It was a haunting detail that felt like a tiny, trapped soul. I tucked the card deep into my jeans pocket, making sure it wouldn't slip out. The giant doll girl led me through the hall, past creatures that defied logic. I watched a grotesque corpse gnawing on a horse leg, my curiosity getting the better of me. When we reached the rising platform, the doll girl's face seemed to sag, deep lines appearing around her mouth. She looked exhausted, or rather, starving. "What happens if they attack a player in here?" I asked. She pressed a button on the wall, and the platform began its slow ascent. "They get a full stomach," she muttered resentfully. "So, no punishment." I pushed, lacking any sense of tact. "Survival of the dead," she sighed. "Why would there be a punishment for that?" "Then why didn't they attack me?" She rolled her eyes, or at least, the empty sockets where her eyes used to be. "You've got some self-awareness, at least. It's the current rule of the Hall of Mourning. If not for that, you'd be a pile of meat sitting right here." She patted her stomach and grunted. "Eating, can't eat players. Can't waste the effort. The rules will change soon enough." I caught that last part immediately. How soon? 5 or 6 months? Or sooner? She knit her brows. How should I know? I didn't push further. Knowing that players were currently protected, likely like pigs being fattened for slaughter, was enough for now. The platform clicked into place inside the foul-smelling cafe. Looking through the dark glass, I saw a mother pulling a noisy little boy along. It looked so normal, so peaceful. I stepped out of the cafe and into the mall. The fresh, filtered air filled my lungs. It was a luxury compared to the stench I'd just left behind. I walked to the bubble tea shop next door and ordered an iced fruit tea. As I waited, I saw that same little boy run toward the doll girl at the cafe. He grabbed her skirt, and she leaned down, smiling warmly as she carried him inside. I took a sip of my drink, the sweetness cooling my throat. I didn't look back. I already knew how that boy's story ended. A few steps away, the mother's terrified scream pierced the air. A second later, the familiar female broadcast voice drowned her out. "Good evening, player. A new instance is available for you. Here we go again." That voice had told me don't stop, and she wasn't kidding. At least this time I was rested and fed. Last time, an instance popped up because the police were closing in. What was it this time? "Please leave Wanxiang Plaza within 3 minutes," the voice said calmly. "Otherwise, you will lose the chance to choose this specific instance." The police were coming. If the game was telling me to run, it meant this instance wasn't about them, but I needed to be clear of their net. I started running up the escalator. I took one last look back. Crimson blood was already snaking out from under the cafe door. I heard the wet sounds of chewing mixed with the mother's breakdown. Passers-by peeked in, only to scream and bolt. I burst out of the mall into the sweltering August heat. Across the street, I saw the flashing lights of police cars. "Good," the voice said. "Congratulations. You've secured your opportunity." The light turned green. I hurried across the crosswalk, moving away from the sirens. Instance, cat and mouse, the voice announced. Since you chose to remain hidden, your information was suppressed, drawing high-level attention from human authorities. I took another long pull of my fruit tea. The cold liquid calmed my heart. I'd seen death now. I wasn't as tense as I used to be. The authorities believe your ID number is searchable, the voice continued, meaning you lack the ability to alter physical documents. Well, she wasn't wrong. I didn't have that power. But, the voice whispered, in the carnival, you can have that power. I froze for a second, a surge of excitement hitting me. I focused harder. In 3 hours, the devouring villa instance will begin. Location, suburban isolation zone, villa number 12. Do you wish to participate? I looked at my half-finished tea. They really didn't want me to have a quiet night, did they? But the promise of being able to change my identity for real, that was a prize I couldn't ignore. I looked up at the towering skyscrapers, their windows flickering with 1,000 points of light like distant stars. My heart hammered against my ribs. The opportunity was staring me right in the face. There was no way I was turning this down. My situation was desperate, and I had no path of retreat. Even if there was only a sliver of hope, I had to grab it. I thought about the crimson blood I'd just seen. Without hesitation, I mentally selected yes. Player, take note, the voice announced. You will enter the devouring villa instance in 3 hours. Monster rank, 4 to 5. The 10-person house landlord. That was new. I raised an eyebrow as I processed the broadcast. Did 4 to 5 mean the level fluctuated between the two, or was there some hidden catch? The voice continued, cold and mechanical. Mission, kill the 10-person house landlord. Seize the most precious treasure within the house. Time limit, none. Location, suburban isolation zone, villa number 12. The broadcast cut out. I took another long draw of my fruit tea. The icy sweetness coated my throat, helping me keep my head straight. I pulled out my phone as I walked, searching for the suburban isolation zone. It was a small cluster of villas tucked away at the very edge of Anwu City. The map showed it was surrounded by mountains on all sides. The nearest subway station was about 700 meters away. I whispered a quick curse to myself. A subway station out that far? It would take 3 hours to get there by train. I didn't have that much time. If I was late, I was dead. I was currently near the city center. A taxi would take 50 minutes. I stepped over the cracked, old cement tiles of the sidewalk and stopped in front of a bank to call a ride. From this angle, I could see a line of police cars parked 50 meters away. The city lights turned the night into day, but the atmosphere was anything but bright. People were running toward me, faces twisted in terror. A young couple sprinted past, their skin deathly pale. They looked like they were about to vomit. It just chewed them up, the girl sobbed. It was horrible. We need to go to the supermarket and stock up, the guy replied, his voice shaking. It's like a zombie virus. It ate 2 people just like that. My ride arrived. I yanked the door open and urged the driver to move fast. More and more people were flooding out of the mall area. If we didn't leave now, the roads would be gridlocked. The driver slammed on the gas and ducked into a narrow side street. Man, what the hell is going on back there? The driver asked, glancing at the rearview mirror. I just shook my head, pretending I didn't know a thing. I sat stiffly in the back seat, my mind racing. The carnival was getting interesting. This wasn't just survival anymore. The mission actually required me to kill a monster. The difficulty was on another level. I needed to use these 3 hours to gather information and check my available skills. The city lights blurred past the window, a beautiful night scene I couldn't afford to enjoy. I stared at my palm for 3 seconds, entering the Player Center forum. I started scrolling through the threads, hunting for anything useful. I saw one comment claiming they'd easily handled a level 3 weirdo. I tapped the search bar and typed in 10-person house landlord. Nothing. Empty. I tried searching for landlord and 10-person house separately. Under the landlord tag, most posts were just people complaining that their landlords had turned into monsters. A few others mentioned landlords dying suddenly or trying to evict them. Useless. Then, I found a single post under the other tag. It was posted by an account called Nightmare Bookstore. Unlike the other players, this username was written in a jarring, blood-red font. The profile picture was a sheet of parchment covered in strange symbols. I opened the post. It was a short advertisement posted just last night. Surprise news. Nightmare Bookstore has received a formal residency permit for the player forum. It looked like a shop run by a monster. Was this some kind of special account within the carnival? I kept reading. Are you still troubled by your lack of knowledge regarding monsters? Are you still ignorant of the customs of the new world? Have you survived instances relying solely on brute force and luck? Nightmare Bookstore proudly recommends coexisting with taboo entities. It sounded like an encyclopedia. I scanned the text until my eyes hit the words I was looking for. This book contains over 300 types of monsters, including but not limited to weirdos, cursed remains, dolls, witches, demons, beast-field phantoms, embroidered shoes, and the 10-person house. I perked up. This was exactly what I needed. 1,444 pages total. Comprehensive content. Note: the book will not disclose monster weaknesses, as that is prohibited. Price: 2 gold coins. See the online mall for details. The post included a few photos. It looked well illustrated and easy to read. I checked the comments for reviews, but the view count was pathetic. No likes, no comments. The account only had 3 ads total, all mentioning a partnership with the Demon Department Store. I exited the forum and opened the online mall. The interface was clean and simple. Categories were listed at the top: weapons, healing, food, and books. Just as I was about to browse, a line of red text flashed across the screen. Welcome, player. The mall operates on a tiered system. Your ability level determines which items are unlocked. The higher your level, the more you can buy. Currently, you may purchase a total of 10 items across 4 categories. Choose wisely. The text flickered and vanished. I leaned forward, focusing on the screen. Under the Weapons tab, there was only one option: an unremarkable short dagger. 20 gold coins. I tapped the details. Short dagger. Available to level 2 players and above. Can damage level 4 monsters and below. There was only one healing item. 2. A glass bottle labeled Universal Potion. Also 20 gold coins. It could heal injuries caused by level 4 monsters or lower. I scrolled to the food section. This one had more variety, 7 items in total. The list made my stomach turn. Human limbs, human heads, human torsos. Then, tucked at the bottom, was a barbecue pork rice and lemon tea combo. The human parts were 3 gold coins each. The rice combo was 3 silver coins. I went silent for a moment. Where did they even get the limbs and heads? I thought about the people who failed the instances. They weren't just killed, they were processed. I looked out the car window. We were still moving through the city. People were still out for evening walks, completely unaware that they were just items on a menu. The sight of the people outside blurred with the images of severed limbs on my screen. A wave of nausea hit me. The absurdity of it all felt like a weight in my chest. I quickly looked away and forced myself to focus. Honestly, those human parts seemed more useful than the short dagger. If I ran into a monster, I could just toss them a snack and run. I sighed and tapped the books category. Only one item floated there. It was called Coexisting with the Forbidden. The description was vague. It wouldn't tell me a monster's specific weakness, but it promised deeper knowledge. I didn't hesitate. I stared at the buy button and pressed my left palm, where my player mark glowed, against the interface. A heavy, leather-bound book suddenly materialized on my lap. It was the size of a standard sheet of paper, thick and imposing. The cover was a deep crimson, embossed with the black bird in a dragon's mouth symbol I knew all too well. I turned on my phone's flashlight to cut through the dimness of the car. I flipped to the table of contents and scanned the entries until I found it. Page 558, The Man-Eating House. The pages felt strange. They were soft and warm, textured exactly like human skin. I read the entry carefully. Man-eating houses weren't common, but they weren't rare either. They fed on the flesh and blood of players. The higher the house's level, the more players it needed to consume. They could also eat ordinary humans or clean livestock, but there was one strict rule. They could never eat a weirdo or any other supernatural creature. I paused. If I used my ability to transform into a monster, would the house be unable to eat me? The motion of the car was starting to make me feel a bit dizzy. I took a sip of my lemon tea to settle my stomach and kept reading. It turned out these houses couldn't hunt for themselves. The ones hidden deep in the mountains would light up at night to lure in unsuspecting travelers. Because of this, the Carnival Paradise organization managed them directly. My breath hitched when I read the next line. Every man-eating house was assigned a landlord. The landlord could be any type of monster. I leaned back, my mind racing. So, the level 4 and 5 warning the girl had announced earlier referred to two separate entities. My mission wasn't just to kill one creature. I had to kill the house and its master. A chill crawled down my spine. If I hadn't bought this book, I never would have realized there were two of them. The book explained that landlords signed rental agreements with the authorities. They got a fully equipped house for a very low price, but they had to ensure the house was fed every cycle. If the house got too hungry, it would start making noise, a literal stomach growl from the walls. The landlord's job was to toss food into the mouth of the house. The chapter ended there. I shut the book and stared out the window. The trees were whipping past us like dark ghosts. We were on the highway now, speeding toward the black silhouette of the mountains. I massaged my scalp, trying to process the details. The mouth of the house, I whispered to myself. That suggested only a specific part of the building could actually consume people. That had to be the weakness. But what about the landlord? I didn't even know what kind of creature I was facing. I realized I was severely undergeared. I went back to the mall and spent 40 gold coins on the short dagger and the universal potion. Both were effective against level 4 monsters. It wasn't much, but it gave me a bit more confidence. I took another drink of my tea, letting the sugar give me a small hit of dopamine. Once I felt calmer, I checked my updated status. My mimicry ability had reached level 5. The upgrade was significant. I could now transform into any monster and fool anything level 5 or below. There was no time limit anymore. I could even alter my aura to trick other players into thinking I was someone else, or something else entirely. Most importantly, I could hide my player tattoo for an hour and a half. This was a game changer. If I encountered high-level monsters, I could just wear their faces to intimidate others. Then I checked my grumble ability. It was still level 4. It allowed me to verbally abuse and shift blame onto a target, weakening their spirit and draining their power. It worked on players and monsters level 4 and below. Since it hadn't leveled up, I didn't dwell on it. I did the math in my head. My mission was to kill a level 4 and a level 5 monster. My mimicry was level 5, but it wasn't an offensive skill. My grumble was level 4, but it only weakened enemies. It didn't kill them. My only real weapon was a dagger meant for level 4s. I looked down at the blade in my hand. Dealing with the level 4 entity was doable. But the level 5? That was going to be a problem. I turned the silver-gray steel dagger over in my hands, admiring the way the light caught the blade. It felt solid, real. Meanwhile, about 8 kilometers away, a government vehicle was speeding toward the quarantine zone. Guanin sat in the back, his body suddenly jolting upright. He listened, eyes wide with disbelief, as a feminine voice broadcasted directly into his mind. "Hello, player. A dungeon has been detected that you are eligible to enter." The voice continued, cold and mechanical. It reminded him that after the last game of cat and mouse, everyone had completely lost their memories and data regarding a certain individual. Guanin's expression darkened. Was the mysterious player the police had been hunting finally going to show up? Of course, the voice whispered. Someone felt that wasn't enough. He has chosen to risk traveling to the very quarantine zone where you are located. Guanin focused, his heart racing. In 2 hours and 20 minutes, the dungeon devouring villa will begin. The location is Villa number 12 in the suburban quarantine zone. Guanin froze. That was exactly where he was supposed to be quarantined. Do you wish to participate in the devouring villa dungeon? He glanced at his superiors in the front seat and didn't hesitate. He chose yes. The broadcast was clear. That person was entering the dungeon to grab more benefits for themselves. Since the system had wiped their identity and cameras couldn't capture their face, it was obvious they were using the power of the joyful paradise. If this person gained any more power, the police's job would become impossible. Even if there were risks, that person was a player. Bringing them in for questioning was a necessity. As the blood-red text faded from his vision, Guanin's palms broke out in a cold sweat. He wondered how difficult this dungeon would be. If he could successfully take this person away, he might finally get some answers. Attention player. You will enter Devouring Villa in 2 hours and 20 minutes. Monster level, 4 to 5. Dungeon mission. Kill the players threatening the safety of the 10-person house landlord. Protect the house's most precious treasure. Kill. Guanan's heart skipped a beat. The image of his colleague's gruesome death from that morning flashed in his mind. He gripped the armrest and gagged, acid rising in his throat. To kill someone who might have saved his life just to become a puppet for the joyful paradise? Who would want that? He closed his eyes, his heart drumming against his ribs like a war god's mallet. I knew none of this. I sat in the back of the taxi, focusing all my mental energy on the pages regarding the 10-person house. I memorized every detail, every rule, and every hint. Once I was sure, I leaned back and adjusted my posture, finding a comfortable spot. I focused on my breathing, letting the tension drain away. I needed to enter this dungeon with a clear head. 10 minutes later, the taxi pulled into a pitch-black villa district. The car slowed as we reached a narrow path. The house is on your right, the driver said, pointing down the trail. Follow this to the end. The car can't fit through there. I looked where he was pointing. A few sparse streetlights cast broken shadows across the pavement. The villas lining the road were dark, looming like man-eating beasts in the night. You're sure this is the place? The driver asked, sounding uncertain. I couldn't blame him. The area was deathly quiet. The trees were mostly bare, newly transplanted saplings that looked like thin, clawed silhouettes against the sky. This is it, I confirmed. I grabbed my book, my items, and my fruit tea, stepping out into the cold air. I watched the taxi pull a quick U-turn and vanish. The silence rushed in to meet me. I kept my breathing shallow and my footsteps light as I turned onto the narrow path. Soon, I saw a flicker of light. It was coming from the villa on the right. I stopped at the iron gate of villa number 12 and took a long look. This house was different from the others. It was noticeably smaller, the walls were slightly tilted at an odd angle, and its silhouette felt sharper, more aggressive. The light came from a stained glass window in the attic. The colorful glow contrasted sharply with the deep blackness of the lower floors. Through the glass, I could see a hunched, distorted silhouette. The landlord. I thought for a moment, then tucked my book into a flower bed outside the garden. I placed my nearly empty teacup beside it. I cleared my throat and pressed the doorbell. The silhouette in the attic stood up. It looked tall and strange. It, or she, moved with terrifying agility. Within seconds, I heard the sound of a door creaking open. Heavy shoes dragged across the garden path. The iron gate groaned as it swung inward. Despite my preparation, a surge of nerves hit me. Every muscle in my body tensed. I forced myself to relax. "Who is it?" a raspy voice asked. The tone was bizarre. The speaker didn't seem to understand how to ask a question. The inflection was unnatural, rising sharply at the end of the sentence. Under the dim glow of the streetlight, I studied the landlord. My hand stayed gripped tight on the knife in my pocket. He was an ancient, terrifying man. His skin was oxidized and shriveled, hanging in loose, pale blue folds like peeling wall paint. He wore a long, tattered red bathrobe and was smiling at me. "It is so late. Do you need a place to stay?" I stared at his rotting gums and felt a wave of nausea. The way he asked was strange. He couldn't seem to tell if I was a player or just a normal person. Did it even matter to him? I decided to play it safe. "Yes. May I come in?" The man's mouth stretched even wider. His cloudy blue eyes locked onto me like a predator spotting prey. "Of course," he said. "I am the landlord here. But staying here costs money." His voice suddenly spiked in pitch, becoming frantic and breathless. "Tell me, do you have gold coins? Are you a player?" I went still. My mind raced, dissecting his words. Gold coins. A monster linking the two so directly? The sudden shift in his voice was incredibly unnatural. I looked into those cloudy blue eyes, and suddenly, the tension left my body. My muscles relaxed. Oh, this wasn't an opponent I needed to be afraid of. His emotions were far too easy to read. It was too obvious. I had spent enough time observing people like my aunt, my cousin, and my classmates to know one thing. Obvious emotions meant instability. They were flaws. They were weaknesses I could exploit. Gold coins. I repeated the words in my mind. I stared at the landlord, and a sudden, interesting theory took root. According to the guide Coexisting with Taboos, a landlord only needs to pay a tiny amount of rent to maintain a 10-man house. Seeing how desperately this monster craved a player's currency, I wondered, was he broke? Was he about to lose his lease? Gold coins, I asked, throwing the question back at him. What gold coins? With humans, a question like that usually forced them to spill more details. I had to try it. This creature seemed stupid. Leading him into a trap should be easy. They are about half the size of your palm. The landlord's saggy eyelids snapped open. He held up his pale, withered hands to gesture the size. Ancient gold coins. Coins from the joyous paradise. Do you have them on you? His voice grew frantic, his words tumbling out in a high-pitched rasp. Human, are you a player? Give me the coins. If you do, I will tell you how to clear the instance. Just 3 coins. That's all I need. I caught the flaw immediately. Even with my limited knowledge, I knew 3 coins couldn't be a fortune. He really was desperate. He was probably facing eviction. I had his measure now. I shook my head and took 2 steps back, putting on my best act of confusion. Are you okay, sir? I don't know anything about players or gold coins. I just wanted to rent a room. If this is how it is, maybe I should find somewhere else. I needed an excuse to leave. My plan was to slip away, disguise myself as a high-level horror entity, and return to exploit the landlord's financial ruin. If I played my cards right, this instance wouldn't be difficult at all. The landlord's face darkened. His eyelids slumped back down, and his cloudy blue eyes locked onto me with a cold, predatory gaze. He tilted his neck with a sickening crack. Cunning players, he hissed. I've seen so many of you. You act innocent just to protect your wealth. We won't talk about the rent for now, but you aren't leaving. Don't move. Let me see your left hand, child. I slowly extended my palm, keeping a polite, puzzled expression on my face. I watched as he pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and began rubbing my skin. I almost wanted to laugh. Guanin had already tried this trick on me. Old man, why are you touching me? Where are my coins? I thought to myself. He scrubbed my palm with everything he had. But no matter how hard he rubbed, my hand stayed clean. There wasn't a trace of a mark, even though it smelled like fresh meat to him. The landlord's anticipation crumbled into disappointment. His loose skin trembled with suppressed rage. Watching his defeat gave me a faint, cold sense of pleasure. It flowed through my veins like a drug. For the first time, I felt truly relaxed. The landlord shoved the dirty handkerchief back into his pocket. I took the opportunity to pull my hand away and back off. I'm leaving now. Goodbye. The instance hadn't officially started yet, so I was free to go. I had arrived 2 hours early, and I wasn't going to waste that time. This game likely had other players with opposing goals, just like the last one. If I could use a monster's identity to gather more information, my chances of survival would skyrocket. What? The landlord let out a wet, gurgling sound. Suddenly, things spiraled out of control. The monster lunged forward and clamped his hand onto my arm. With terrifying strength, he dragged me toward the garden. Who said you could leave? He shrieked. You aren't going anywhere. You're already here. Damned human. You might not be a player, and you might not have coins, but you won't be a total waste. You can at least fill the belly of my house. He let out a guttural roar as he hauled me toward the front door. There are 2 big fish coming tonight anyway. You stay here and follow the rules. I was dragged across the barren lawn. Alarm bells rang in my head. My mind raced to find a way to regain control of the situation. I needed to flip the script on him, and I needed to do it fast. Meanwhile, a government car rolled silently down the asphalt road, stopping at the edge of the quarantine zone. Inside, Guanin toyed with a digital recorder while speaking to his superior on the phone. Remember, the voice on the line said, record every word that person says. Your safety is the priority, but completing the mission comes first. Do not get distracted. I understand, Guanin replied. Our analysts think that if the mysterious player is there, and if he really is a carrier for the joyous paradise infection. The superior paused. Then there might be more than 2 players in this instance. If it's safe, try to get his fingerprints or hair samples. I've sent Team Yellow to back you up. They'll be there in 10 minutes. That player isn't getting away. Guanin knew they wanted him to come back alive. But a thought nagged at him. What if there were only 2 players? What if, like last time, only one could survive? The phone went silent. It was a possibility they had all considered. Based on the files, This mysterious player was moving through the game faster than anyone else. He was the first to bring a functional item back into reality. He was likely the chosen one of the joyous paradise. But if the game followed its usual brutal logic, the task of spreading the infection might just fall to whoever killed him. And Guanan was much easier for the authorities to control than a wild card. Prioritize the mission, the superior said firmly. Stay safe. Guanan didn't speak for a few seconds. Then, he let out a short, careful laugh. Don't worry, Chief. Consider it done. On the other side of the fence, the landlord dragged me into the house. The interior was a jarring contrast to the modern exterior. It was filled with rotting furniture and ancient relics. I scanned the room, looking for anything I could use. I saw a tattered cloth sofa, a joyous ball tucked in a corner, peeling yellow wallpaper, and a dusty, cold fireplace. The air was stifling and hot, like the inside of a century-old lung forced into a modern shell. The floorboards groaned and creaked for no reason. The empty fireplace made a sharp cracking sound. I realized then what the guide meant about the eating house. This building was starving. The landlord gripped my arm, heading for the stairs. I had to buy time. Wait, I shouted. What exactly is a player? The landlord stopped. He whipped his head around, his cloudy eyes boring into mine. He didn't answer. Instead, his throat twitched with a hungry, rhythmic throb. I looked at the landlord and realized something chilling. He wasn't going to answer me. To a supernatural creature like him, a normal human was just low-value prey. The only way to get information out of a place like this was to risk my life and find the mouth of the eating house myself. That was okay. I had a plan. The house didn't kill other monsters, and I had the power to play a role. If I acted well enough, I could escape. Suddenly, that familiar, dull pleasure washed over me again. It felt like a weak electric current spreading through my body. It was subtle, but it felt like an addiction. I squeezed my palm hard, using the pain to snap myself out of it. I had to focus. If I played my part perfectly, I could use the house's own rules to change my identity entirely. In the dim, pale light, the landlord's mouth curled into a grotesque grin. Player, you're staying the night, aren't you? Don't worry about that. His rotting grip loosened on my arm. He raised a withered hand and pointed toward the stairs at the back of the house. I noticed the house was groaning louder now, as if its hunger was peaking. Follow me upstairs, child, the landlord rasped. I'll show you to your room. His eyelids drooped, but they couldn't hide the murderous hunger in his eyes. He wasn't just representing the house, he was starving too. I could practically see his thoughts. He wanted to split me in two, half for himself, and half for this godforsaken building. I didn't waste any more time trying to talk. There was no point. If I kept pushing, I'd just provoke him into killing me right here in the living room. He was a supernatural entity, and I didn't know his rank yet. If he was level 5, I was in serious trouble. I didn't have the strength to fight him head-on, and I still hadn't found the house's weakness or its treasure. I hadn't even seen a sign of other players. All right, I said, nodding. Lead the way. As his slippers shuffled across the floor, I activated my level 4 ability, Complain. I stepped onto the creaking floorboards and kept my voice low, just loud enough for the house to hear me. The outside looked okay, but the inside? It's like a toad trying to dress up as Batman. It's pathetic. I was testing the waters. Testing the house was safer than testing the landlord. The eating house couldn't hunt on its own, which is why it needed the landlord to move for it. My complain ability only worked on creatures level 4 or lower. If the landlord was level 5 and caught me using a trick on him, I'd be dead. I followed him up the old wooden stairs, watching the house's reaction closely. If the building was level 4, my complaint should have drained its energy. Thump! The stair plank in front of me jumped violently. It felt like a massive protest. Then, the entire house began to shake. The floorboards rattled and banged like a person throwing a temper tantrum because they'd been insulted. I frowned. So the eating house was level 5? So noisy, I whispered under my breath. I called you a toad, and you're acting exactly like one. I was ready to accept that it was level 5, but as soon as those words left my mouth, the noise died down. The stairs tried to jump again, but the wood only lifted an inch before thudding back down. The strength was gone. It looked exhausted. I felt a surge of relief. The house was level 4. My first complaint hadn't drained all its energy, but the second one was the straw that broke the camel's back. I looked up at the landlord's tattered red bathrobe swaying in front of me. This was the real problem. The landlord was level 5. Unlike the house, he could move freely, making him much more dangerous. My weapons and abilities couldn't touch a level 5. "Hurry up, kid," the landlord snapped. He grabbed my arm with a crushing grip and hauled me upward. He flicked a switch on the second floor, and a dim light flickered on. The smell of dust and old blood hit me instantly. The second floor was even more cramped than the first. A narrow hallway stretched out with 5 doors and another set of stairs at the far end. The landlord dragged me toward the first door near the staircase. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy key.